Good evening. Calling the meeting to order. It is the Select Board meeting of the Town of Arlington. It is an unusual Wednesday meeting, September 12, 2018 at 7:15 p.m. We're just about on time. Up front, I'd like to introduce everybody. Up on the front, Selectman, all the way to my right, Select Board Member John Hurd. Immediately to my right, Select Board Member Joe Curo. I am Dan Dunn. To my left is Select Board Member Diane Mahan, and all the way over is Select Board Member Kevin Greeley. We are joined by Town Manager Adam Chapdelaine, Town Council Doug Heim, and Board Administrator Marie Kropelka. A couple things about tonight's agenda. I'm going to be pulling up one item. I'm going to pull the Selectmen's Awards up to be the second item. And if you're here for agenda item 9, which is the Eversource petition about Garden Street, that item has been withdrawn, and we're not going to be talking about that tonight. So if you're here for item number 9, you can go watch the Red Sox game or something.
100th win, hopefully.
Exactly. I feel like I forgot anything. I didn't have a quote today, so I guess we're just going to be here. First up on our agenda is we are here for an appointment of the Treasurer Collector. Town Manager, would you like to do the introduction and talk about the process, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Dunn. So as the board knows, this past year there was a successful ballot question to transmit or transition the Treasurer Collector's position from elected to appointed. That then prompted the elected Treasurer, Dean Carmen, to serve notice to the Board of Selectmen that he was intending on resigning, which would then have triggered the board to go out and solicit and seek applicants for the Treasurer Collector position. That was in the absence, that's the statutory default, that's in the absence of further bylaws or amendments to the Town Manager Act, which I think the board will likely contemplate later this year or early next year going forward to town meeting. So, given all of that, the board authorized a selection process, put together a screening committee that consisted of myself, Deputy Town Manager Sandy Pooler, HR Director Karen Malloy, Chairman Dunn, sitting Treasurer Collector Dean Carmen, as well as school CFO John Denizio. Interviewed 2 rounds of candidates. Really did have an impressive selection of candidates to choose from for Treasurer Collector, but there was one unanimous pick that we have before you tonight. Her name is Phyllis Marshall. She's not only experienced as a Treasurer Collector, but also as an Assistant Town Administrator and Interim Town Administrator next door in Belmont, so she's got a depth and breadth of municipal experience and municipal finance experience. So we're very excited to have her joining the team and hope that the board will entertain her approval and hire tonight. And given that she was transitioning out of a position in Belmont, she's actually able to start work tomorrow if approved by the board, so she's raring and ready to go. So I suppose without saying anything further, if the board would like to meet Phyllis and ask any questions.
Yes, please. Ms. Marshall, come on up. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we've had your resume in front of us. Why don't you get your introduction? Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you're excited about?
I'm very happy to be here. I have been working in public administration for about 30 years, and I'm very interested in working here. Arlington has a great reputation, has a lot of work to do, and I'm happy to join this team. I think you have a great team to be a part of, and I'm looking forward to this. I've met with the Treasurer's Office staff, and I've met with the Treasurer, current Treasurer, I think that we covered a lot of good ground during the interviews. I'm looking forward to working with the staff and the community, getting to know people, and working throughout the town offices to be a part of this group. I think that being a part of working with all the departments who don't necessarily deal with the Treasurer's Office on a daily basis will be a good setting. And I'd like to make sure that people understand I have an open door policy and that I like to have dialogue with folks so that when an issue might come up, I have a rapport with them and I know how to address some of the issues.
Thank you. Question from the board.
Second.
Motion from Mrs. Hahn, second by Mr. Curo.
I just want to say welcome. I have heard such glowing recommendations from the few people that I spoke to from the very beginning of the process, in terms of the caliber of candidates that we had, but really how you stood head and shoulder above, I guess, the finalists and semifinalists. And I'm really excited that our first appointed treasurer is a professional and highly experienced woman who does have so many years of experience, you know, over in Belmont, and I see originally, I think, something in Iowa. And I know you said you've met the staff. We have a great staff down there that really have helped with the outgoing last elected treasurer, Dean Common, really not only keep the place running, but instituted some new policies that the citizens of the town have wanted. But there are more things to be done, and just judging from what I've heard and what I've read in your curriculum vitae, resume, you're definitely going to be qualified. It's going to be a real exciting time for Arlington. So, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Kevin?
I would assume you've been before the Belmont Board of Selectmen
Yes.
before? How would you compare this board? More attractive? Younger? No. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
You missed your chance. The answer is there's more of you.
That is exactly the answer I was going to give.
There's more of us in weight and number, right? But congratulations. Welcome. Really look forward to working with you. If you're half as good as Dean Carmen, we're lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to say welcome. Like the other board members had said, your resume speaks for itself. You certainly have the qualifications, and based on the recommendations we're getting from the committee, I think you're the perfect choice, and excited to have you on board and look forward to working with you.
Me as well, thanks.
I'll just echo my colleagues and say, you know, I think you know that this is the culmination of a very long conversation we've had in the town, and this is, you know, another step and a big change, and certainly I think Dean has laid some great groundwork for you. You come with fantastic credentials, and I feel very confident, you know, based on what I've read here and your resume and the work and the recommendations from the interview committee, as well as your references who accompanied you tonight, that you will, you know, prove that this experiment and this step that we're taking was well worth it. So we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, I as well.
So we've got a motion from Mrs. Hahn, a second by Mr. Kuro.
Did you want to call on the two people that came up?
I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No.
A motion from Mrs. Mahan, second by Mr. Kuro. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we close out that topic entirely, I just should note that we have put Mr. Carmen in the unemployment line, and among other. And we said it
He's
before,
on.
and we will say it again, that we really thank him for his service in his, as elected treasurer. Taking an item out of order, we are going to do the Selectmen's Awards next, which is item number 12. The other Mr. Hurd.
Good evening.
Good
Jack
evening.
Hurd, Precinct 2, is that what I said? No. We're here just to give an update on the progress of the awards committee that you entrusted in us to go forward for this year. We've met, we've done the press release, you probably saw it on the website, and it's been put out a number of places. And so we just want to give you an update on that. The deadline at the moment for nominations is September 28th. What we would like to recommend is we extend that by 2 weeks to October 12th. With the summer and getting everything going. So we don't think that will affect our deliberation at all, and we think that would be helpful. So that was one thing. So I'm here with Clarissa Rowe and Irene Shea, two of our members. Also, Kate Leary and Jeff Russell are the other members, 5 of us, and it's a great committee, and we're looking forward to it. The event is planned, the awards event is planned for November 28th. It's a Thursday. I think it's the week after Thanksgiving. So we look forward to that, and we look forward to the nominations. The other thing we wanted to speak with you about is the idea from Clarissa Rowe and others on the committee to add an award. I know the board had asked us to maybe consolidate. We've actually started that in the sense that we're kind of taking out redundant language from the different awards. As you know, there's some redundancy, so, but I'm going to let Clarissa take it from here, but we think we should have another award for one very important reason. So Clarissa?
The man was outnumbered. We would love to have one of the awards after a woman. And we think Peg Spengler would be the appropriate person. So we're here to ask your permission to do that. And Elaine knew her so well. And I've got this sheet of paper of everything she did. She was probably on at least 25 town committees or commissions. And she really cared about the libraries now, as we know, but she also really cared about the schools and the children of Arlington, and we think that she would be appropriate.
I'd like to tell you a story about Peg, not involved in town stuff. At the time, she was select woman when my mother was dying. And my mother and she were great friends, and I knew Peg since I was a little girl. And when my mother was dying, I was at Mass General Hospital, and Peg called, and she said, "Would you mind if I sat with you?" Now, she had 50 things she could have done that day, and she sat with me all day and was just there for me when I needed her most. And I think that speaks so much to who Peg was. And so from that day forward, my mother died a few days later, Peg was my friend. And we had a really special friendship. And Bill and Ken and Peg and I traveled, and she was an amazing model for me in what I wanted to be. So she personifies so much of what we believe in and love in Arlington. So I hope you'll consider that.
I'd like to move to approve the recommendation of the Select Board Awards Committee.
Second.
What will you officially call it? Margaret, how will you?
The Margaret Peg Spengler Award.
Right.
And we're rewriting the definitions. We should have those ready in a couple of weeks. The wordsmith, Kate Leary, has been...
She's a godsend.
Yes, she's been helping us. This is a very busy time for her, so at the beginning of school, but she will be assisting us with that, which is great. So we'll send you the definitions, and we'll rewrite the press release so we can get the thing.
Okay.
If I could just point out, in past years, this has been, a lot of times people nominate someone that they feel has done a great service to the town. They don't actually even identify the award. So given the fact that we don't feel like this award's not actually in the queue yet, most people don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. So we don't see that being a problem at all.
Okay. Mr. Greeley?
I just absolutely feel Peg Spengler, you know. I remember when I was going to run, Bob Walsh told me we had to go and get Peg's blessing. I was so nervous meeting her for the first time. But, you know, we have a Good Citizen Award. Why couldn't that become the Peg Spengler Award? So we don't have to make 6 awards.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, something like that.
There's a lot of repetition in the description.
I agree.
So we want to see if we can tailor it down a little bit so it makes more sense.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, and also the committee should, you know, someone may, you know, nominate someone for the Good Citizen, but really they deserve the Joe Greeley, you know, so you know you have that freedom.
Yeah, we have that.
You're all pretty experienced at this, yeah.
So I've got a motion for Mr. Carroll, seconded by Mr. Hurd. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for taking us out of order.
So, next up is our consent agenda. We have minutes of meeting for July 26th. We have a one-day beer and wine license for September 22nd, private event at Whittemore Robbins. September 22nd, private event at Robbins Town Hall. September 29th, Robbins Library Reading Room, private event. September 29th, Robbins Memorial Town Hall, private event. Reappointment to the Community Preservation Committee of Ann Woodward. We have appointments of several new election workers: Eileen Blasey, Ann Breslin, Daniel Brosnan, Kathleen Doyle, Antoinette Festa, Francis Foley, Jillian MacArthur, Joyce Rodocchio, Helen Taylor, Florence Williams. That is it for the consent agenda. Is there anybody here who's for any of the items on the consent agenda? They're all private
approval.
events, so I don't think so. We have a motion from Mr. Hahn,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Greeley. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, number 9 has withdrawn, so we're going to skip down to number 10. For approval, common victualler and all alcohol license, Mini Punjab, Kashmir Singh. Mr. Singh, come on up. Welcome. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your business.
Mandeep Sandhu and he's Kashmir Singh. To open the location, taking over the Indian existing restaurant, the Singh Saab.
Could you actually tilt the mic up a little bit and just get a little bit closer? They actually can't hear you. Yeah, thank you again.
Yes, so my name is Mandeep Sandhu. He's Kashmir Singh. We both opening together a restaurant down the street on Singh Saab. We're taking over the existing Indian restaurant with the new name Mini Punjab. We have 2 existing locations, one in Brookline called Shah-e-Punjab and Quincy Sher-e-Punjab. So that's pretty much, and we're not doing that much renovation or anything, just changing the color combination, the floor, and the furniture.
Okay, thank you.
Move approval, move approval subject to conditions as set forth.
Got a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second for discussion, yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Greeley and second by Mr. Curo. So I think I'll just start and say, so we got one of the items in our packet, we got a letter that says they're concerned about the fact that we've got a Punjab restaurant that's right across the street that's literally called Punjab, and they're objecting to the use of the name Mini Punjab directly across the street. And I was curious what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, so the Punjab, as you know, that's a province. It's like Massachusetts, a state, right? So I think it's a very common name. And 10 of the restaurants in Boston has the name Punjab. Even I have 2 locations that I can show you the list if you want.
Sure, it does, yeah.
So
Okay,
it shows like all the names. There's 10 restaurants in Boston area
yeah,
that have Punjab left.
okay. So I'll wait till you get back to the mic so that we can, yeah.
I think
So you want to wait till the mic so people can hear you?
So I think Punjab is like a Punjabi food, northern. It's not like, it's like Indian food, that's not. So I think anybody can open a Punjabi food. It's not like we're using somebody's name or logo. It's not like somebody's personal. It's like a very common Punjab, like Massachusetts. Nobody has a right to, like if I say I want to open something with the name of Massachusetts, another person say it's a registered article. So even I have the article registered with the state of Massachusetts. That's the trademark service, Mini Punjab. So I think that's pretty much.
I just asked a
Yeah,
question.
of course.
I think it was Mandeep.
Yes, Mandeep.
Did you just say that you have something from some commission saying
Yes.
that Punjab isn't trademarked? Is that,
Yes.
okay, I just didn't hear well, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I don't have the copy.
That's okay.
It says that.
Go back to the microphone, I'm sorry. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah,
heard you
there's
correctly.
a registered trademark, service mark with the Secretary of State.
I have thoughts. I don't know, but as chairman, I will let other people go. Sorry.
I just have a question. I
Thank
don't
you.
know.
Please, Mr. Hurd.
What does the word Punjab mean? Does it have a specific meaning?
It's like a
It's a place-
state,
it's
like
a
state
place-
of Massachusetts. It's like a state in India. That's
Okay.
the northern part of India. It's a state.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all the food, northern food is coming from Punjab. And all the restaurants in Boston has the last name, like there's a restaurant in Lexington, it says Royal Punjab. There's a restaurant I have a Sher-e-Punjab in Quincy. I have a restaurant in Brooklyn called Shah-e-Punjab. So Punjab is a food that represent that this is the northern food, not the southern food.
And just to follow up, what's the significance of Mimi? Is there any, I don't know if there's a.
There's a typo in one of them. It's actually mini.
Mini. Okay.
But this is still, keep going. Ask your question.
So you have a restaurant called Punjab?
Yes, it's in the list too, the
And it's
Shah-e.
meant,
Say that
Mini
again?
Punjab is as a second location?
We have third location. We have Shah-e-Punjab and Sher-e-Punjab. There's 2 locations we already have. So this is the third one, the Mini Punjab.
Okay. And all 3 locations have Punjab in.
So, I'll say, I was just unable to resist. If we had a restaurant that was open that was like serving barbecue, and it was an Alabama restaurant, or it was a Memphis restaurant, and someone tried to open something across the street that said it was mini of that, I wouldn't be able to support that. And we also have had in the past, in cab licenses, we had conflict around the word veterans, and whether it's veterans apostrophe S or veterans S, and it was all about the confusion thereof. So I know that I unfortunately can't support this license as written. I would love for you to open another restaurant in Arlington, but I think one of the things that I feel like is important to us as the grantor of licenses is to help support the businesses that we also grant. And while I welcome the competition, I don't welcome that specific name. So I'm certainly willing to support a.
And can I add
version.
something?
Please.
So here, the thing is, like, it's not we like coming up with the new competition. There is that's a already Indian restaurant, so we're just taking over. It's not we opening a new competition in the market.
And I think I'm delighted you're coming to town. I love the food that you're bringing. I love the culture that you're bringing. I love the business that you're bringing. I just don't like the name. Mr. Kira.
I think that what the chair is saying is that with the name, as you proposed, there is a reasonable expectation of confusion. And we're granting the licenses, and we're holding all of the businesses that we license accountable. But to introduce such a reasonable expectation of confusion into the marketplace is something, and I think, while I appreciate this list, that is from the whole greater Boston area. It's not directly across the street.
Okay,
But so, hang on. Let's let him. I'll let you go again, but we're going to let him.
And so, I mean, I think I have the same feeling, and I had thought of the taxi cab situation as well, and I think that it would be irresponsible of us to introduce that type of confusion. Again, I'm also no problem with the competition. All for it. I think it's
if
great.
you look at the list,
Hang on, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll let everyone up here take a run, and then
sure.
we'll ask
Go
you to
ahead.
speak again. Sorry, keep going,
Yeah.
Joe.
So I have no problem with the competition. I look forward to it. It's the potential for confusion that I think is the greater issue. And it's confusion on the part of consumers, and it's confusion on the part of others, too. I mean, if we receive complaints, I mean, it's actually to your benefit not to have that confusion. Let's say, for example, this is a strictly hypothetical.
Mister, could we have some quiet back there, please?
Can you go outside?
Thank you.
Let's say, for example, that we were ever to receive a complaint around one of your competitors. The consumer or the complainant could very reasonably misconstrue the name. We'd be investigating something, we'd be wasting resources to chase down something against someone who was not responsible. It could happen one way or the other. So I think we do have a responsibility to avoid that confusion. I have no problems with anything else in your license, but that is an issue.
Did anyone else want to weigh in on this, Mr. Greeley?
Well, I just want you all to know that I love you, but I think you are just out of your minds on this particular issue, any more than we could not say only one Arlington business can have the name Arlington. I mean, are you really telling me that you think, because it says Mini, and it's across the street from a restaurant, people are going to believe what? It's a little one from that side? Okay, I'll go in because I like that side. I mean, really? I mean, it's the name of a state. But what's the confusion, Joe? I mean, they're coming down to the center and they're going to say, oh, that says Mini. So, I mean, what's the confusion? They won't go to the restaurant?
Well, I think that there's an implied relationship there between the two.
Is there an implied relationship with all the businesses that have the name Arlington?
Well, they're located in Arlington.
Right. I mean, it really is that simple to me. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
something. So when we open, if you look at the list, when we open the restaurant in Quincy, there is a restaurant called Punjab Cafe in there that's been running from 18 years. And we opened the Share Punjab. If you can look at the list, it's in the same town. When we open in Brookline, they have Punjab Palace across the street from us over there. And we had Shane Punjab. City of Boston never object. City of Quincy, but I'm just saying that my thought, because I explained them, the Punjab is not somebody's personal name. It's the name of the state. If it's personal, then I understand that. then anybody can object that, that's it. But it's, the Punjab represent the food. So if we don't use mini, then but we have to use Punjab because we represent the northern food. So we have to use the Punjab either way.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear, if the board is so inclined, from the folks who have filed an objection. I'd also like to know from the applicants what their timeline is, because this presents not a totally unprecedented situation, as the board is noting, but it's certainly an unusual circumstance for us to be having somebody give notice that they have an active trademark concern about a restaurant. One of my concerns would be is if the restaurant opens and then immediately closes or has to change its name because of a successful action. So if the board is inclined, I would like to hear from the objection. I would like to hear from these gentlemen when they plan to make the change official.
And one more thing, if you look up their trademark, the Punjab, that says Punjab celebrating Indian cuisine. Ours says Mini Punjab modern Indian cuisine. If you look at I did with the Secretary of State, it's completely different. So I don't know, it's only one word they're holding the Punjab for everything. I don't know, I don't understand.
So towards the town council's question, when are you planning on, when's your target for changing
As
the name?
soon we get it from the city approval, we have to go to ABCC after that. So I think if city holds off, then we have to wait.
Okay.
You know.
Mr. Leone, did you want to come up and speak or no? Yes, sir. Okay. And yeah.
John Leone, I'm here with Jaswal and Gorinda Pablo, the owners of Punjab, the real Punjab. They are not objecting to the competition at all. They love the competition. Their theory is that the more restaurants bring in more people to the town, bring more people into them. It's the name. It's the mini Punjab. The gentlemen have a history of coming into towns, they just told you, in Brighton and Quincy, opening a restaurant with an extremely similar name to an existing restaurant. If you recall, before Sab Singh, which is the current restaurant, there was another one, Tadika Punjab, or Punjab Tadika? Yeah. When that happened, they lost sales. People were calling that restaurant thinking they were calling this restaurant. They lost takeout sales. The drivers for the pickup, Grubhub, et cetera, would go to that restaurant or their restaurant looking for the food. They got bad Yelp reviews for that restaurant for items that they don't even sell. So they knew it wasn't them. So there is a direct correlation and an impact on their business by the use of the name. Mini Punjab, it's just too close. They do have a service mark, and it is Punjab. It's not Punjab celebrating Indian food. I have them here. I can give them to Doug tomorrow or leave a copy tonight. It's Punjab, and it's right there. If they do decide they're going to go forward with the name, they already have talked to their trademark counsel to see about stopping it. So I think it would be in the best interest of the board to deny them the license, let them come back with another name, keep the same name, come back with another name that doesn't directly impact and trade on their good quality of food and their good quality and their goodwill that they've built up over the 19 years they've been in Arlington. They're a premier Indian restaurant in town and the region, and we think they're trading on their fair name.
Diane.
I've actually been sitting, because I'm sitting on the fence, sitting here. And I was taking what Mr. Greeley said and taking what everybody else has said. And I take, like if somebody said, oh, Arlington Restaurant and Diner, Arlington Tea and Coffee, everybody in Arlington knows that that's because it's Arlington, and maybe even Monotony. But a lot of people, I'm thinking, what if someone came in and we had a 10, 15-year established business called Kathmandu Restaurant? And then someone else came in and said, well, I want to do mini Kathmandu. Well, my daughter-in-law's from Nepal, and, you know, I know exactly what Kathmandu means, and, you know, it's a place and not necessarily a type of cuisine or anything like that. It's implied what the cuisine would be. So I agree with Mr. Greeley in terms of Arlington, but a lot of people, they just know Punjab. To them, that's Punjab, the restaurant, Punjab with their dishes. They don't know unless somebody went on a massive campaign of education that, this is like saying, Arlington something or other. So, and I was leaning towards agreeing, but now I'm leaning towards not voting in favor of mini Punjab because there's not enough knowledge in terms of what's being said from the microphone. Oh, it's just a state, and everybody knows that. Everybody doesn't know that. So, and I think that there will be a lot of confusion. So that's where I am right now. Initially I was in favor of supporting it, but now using my Kathmandu and mini Kathmandu, and pick any other far remote place.
I saw Mr. Greeley before Mr. Hurd.
So, learned counsel, through you, Mr. Chairman, is it mini or Punjab or both they object to? In other words, if they come back and say, okay, we're going to be the Kashmir Punjab, is that okay?
It's the Punjab. The word Punjab.
Not mini then, so mini's okay?
Mini's okay.
No, all right.
But
I did
it's not true that everybody knows all the Indian states. Just as we all don't know all the Canadian states or all the Mexican states, which are our neighboring countries. For everyone to know and assume Punjab is a state in India, I know it because I've been dealing with Gurinder and Jaspal for years. I can't tell you all the other Indian states. And I think it's kind of a misnomer on their part to try and trade on that.
So we're all agreed it's not mini is the problem here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although you thought it was, Joe.
No, mini's not a problem. Mini's not a problem.
And again, it's not the competition either.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, sorry.
Did I cut
I
you
just
off?
want to make one final
Please.
comment, then I'll be quiet. I used to go into this particular Chinese restaurant that would see we were licensing another Chinese restaurant, and they were very upset with me. How come you're allowing another Chinese restaurant? And it's because, thank God, that other Chinese, imagine if when you came to us, we said no, because we already have 3 of those type businesses. So that's to me what this is saying. They open, people will discover and go because it's good food at a fair price, or they won't, period. That's just my opinion.
As I hear the discussions and work this through, I'm actually going to counteract one of the things you just said, but I'm actually now having trouble with the word mini. Not because I understand Punjab is what conflicts, but it's the term mini Punjab across the street. So I actually, because when you had mentioned that Punjab represents a type of food, so if this is a type of food you get in the Punjab region, then I say, okay, that's a reason to call it Punjab. But to choose mini as the word to go with it right across from Punjab, I think that is what really creates the confusion amongst people to go in and say, are they related? We have Punjab and mini Punjab, and that kind of gets me tied up.
I think you articulated something that I had been trying to, and that I hadn't gotten successfully out, which is similarly like Thai Moon versus Thai Isarn. Like they're both Thai, and I'm fine with and I don't regret those licenses. But it is the mini, and so if there is a different flavor of Punjab, Mr. Leone's opinion notwithstanding, I could support that. It is literally the across the street mini one that I'm unhappy with.
I'm gonna follow. As I was going through this, with the term Arlington, there's a lot of things, a lot of establishments that's called Arlington. So you have to know what the specific establishment is. This is a unique name, as far as I know, about any other business. And if I liken it to, say, the Menominee Tavern, and then somebody came before us and said, oh, I want to open the mini Menominee Tavern, they say, that's the name that used to be from Arlington, I think we'd have a pretty easy no to that. And so that's why I'm saying that the word mini actually kind of gives me the most pause out of the name.
Okay. Mr. Heim.
Members of the board, I just, one other thought that I have here is that there is, to my understanding, an active dialogue, or anticipated dialogue between council about this trademark. If the board's inclined, I think the board is also entitled to further information in terms of that dialogue. So I'm not trying to interject my opinion about something I think the board is already well versed on and has discussed at length, but I think the board is also entitled to say that if it wants further information on anything that they can have it.
No. Mr. Mandeep, you was raising.
Okay, so I thought the problem was the word mini, because it's mini Punjab. But if they have problem with the name Punjab, like we have other 2 locations, so can we use that name, Sher Punjab and Shane Punjab? Those are trademark registered from 7 years. That has the last name Punjab too. So that means if you see the list, there's a 12 restaurants, so we cannot use that word, like the food we're representing. If it's the word mini, suppose, so we can change to Shane Punjab, that location we have in Brookline, or Sher Punjab in Quincy. So I think if they have problem with the word Punjab, that's mean like nobody can use their own state name, and that's not objected by the Secretary of State. They registered the service mark, and that should be in the consideration because we registered that with the Secretary of State.
Joe?
Could I just get clarification? So Shera Punjab, both of those are yours?
Yes.
So this would be a third location
Yes.
of an existing?
Yes, sir.
See, I wouldn't have as great a problem with that because it's building on a reputation that's been established elsewhere.
I'm with you.
Although they're objecting to the name Punjab.
I understand.
Because if it's mini, I understand.
I understand, but as I read it, it's all one word. I don't know.
I don't agree with everything Mr. Leone says, just some of the things. Mr. Hurd, where are you on that one? Or do you need more time? Because tabling is an option.
I was going to say, I'm ready to make a motion to table because we have to hear what Attorney Heim referenced. Get the,
Are you operating this business right now?
No, not right now. We will not take over until the ABCC closing will be done. So
Okay.
we will not taking over anything until the ABCC approval will be done.
can I ask a question? Attorney Heim, do you, not to hold you to a definitive, but do you think within the next 2 weeks, you could get that information that right now is sort of being discussed and coming to fruition?
Yes, Vice Chair Mahan. I think what I would want from the town's perspective is a little bit of either further sort of clarity on this trademark issue, that they're basically have exchanged dialogue between council and some correspondence, or alternatively, if these folks are willing to come up with an alternate proposal, I think that would work in the same time frame. So I would expect that both I independently could do some work on it, and also that we could hear from Mr. Leone and any counsel for these gentlemen if it becomes necessary.
Okay, could I change it to a motion to postpone until Monday, September 24th?
I'm going to, you'll forgive me, I cut John off by mistake, and so I'm
sorry.
going to go back to
No,
him.
no,
It was my error. John?
No, so I'll answer your questions. I would prefer, if we can, to table it and get a time for us to consider it, get a little more information, give the objecting party some time to formulate their objection to what we're now proposing. If it's not going to take effect right away anyways.
And I was only contemplating switching my table to postponing so that everybody knows the clock is ticking and, you know, it's not going to, we could table. So I would like to change it to postpone until Monday, September 24th, on the basis that Attorney Heim said all that will be resolved and we'll have all that information. So it's really only a 2-week delay.
We have a motion from Mrs. Mahan. Is there a second on the postponement?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hurd. Any discussion on the topic or the postponement?
Well, just that I know in 2 weeks we're gonna come back and know, since these gentlemen already own 2 restaurants with the name Punjab of this gentleman. So I'd like to ask you directly, are you willing to change from mini Punjab to open this restaurant?
We can,
You don't have to commit to anything, I'm
no,
just
no,
asking.
if they want us to change, we can change name to our existing location, but that's gonna come up at the end again with the word Punjab. So it's gonna be the same thing because they're objecting Punjab, not the mini. So if we can do Sher Punjab or Shane Punjab, not an issue.
Okay,
But it will be the same thing.
thank you. Thank you, sir. Yep.
All right. Any further on this? No? All right, we've got a motion to postpone. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll be good. Okay. Next up, for approval, public entertainment license, Town Tavern, 193 Mass Ave. Hello.
How are you guys?
Welcome. Tell us about your proposal. You don't, actually, I guess we've already read it. You want to, actually, no, I don't have it right here. Oh, because my screen flipped. Tell us about it, please. Sorry, while I pull it up.
So I threw up a dartboard and I had some, for my PDR, I was thinking how else when I'm not doing parties. And then when Mike came through to do the CO, he's like, dude, you probably need an entertainment. I was like, what? So I ran down, I asked for one, I went to Martha and she redrew the stuff, and here I am.
All right. You want a dartboard?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Begreely.
I have to be against this because he's the town tavern and we already have the Monotony Tavern. Move approval.
Second.
Listen, I was falling on a weight and I lost power before I had to run down here. It's only-
I was the state champion in the Minuteman Dart League.
Wow.
Sea level in like 1999.
I used to play too, but we can't have a league because then my insurance goes up. It's only can be for fun. I already looked into that. It's like no leagues and no tournaments.
All right.
Which I was just thinking for fun. I really didn't even think twice about it. I mean, I'm glad Mike saw it and he's like, you better go check that out.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've discussed 2 recreational activities since I've been on this board, and you've been some sort of champion in both of them.
You want to do fact-checking?
Exactly.
We'll see when he comes
We will
down.
see.
You'll
Now
notice
you can
when we
test
talk
that.
about basketball and we talk about running, my mouth is very, very quiet. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Greeley, who's seconded by, not sure. Seconded by Mrs. Mahan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Get my electrician.
Good luck.
Good luck. You were holding that apron there? Is that an apron?
I really ran off the line. It was messed up. You don't even want to know.
Doug, could you do me a favor and go get the open forum thing? Thank you. Next up is the Citizens Open Forum. Except in unusual circumstances, any matter presented for consideration of the board shall neither be acted upon nor a decision made the night of the presentation in accordance with the policy under which this open forum was established. It should be noted there's a 3-minute time limit to present a concern or request. And so we have one person who signed up, and then I'll take anyone else. Eli El-Kuli, welcome. Just double checking, you did not something is on the agenda, you have something else you want to talk about. Are you here about us? Come on, please. Tell us what's on your mind.
Thanks for, first time I'm doing something like that, so but a little nervous, but I could manage. My name is Eli Al-Kuli. I'm the owner of Eli Service Station in Arlington on 125 Broadway. Been there for 10 years, very happy to be there. The problems we have staff problems. Hiring people to pump the gas. No one's want to do the job. When Uber came on board, Uber took all the jobs, all the employee, all the helps from us. So for us to hire a person and pay him $16, $17, or $8 or $20 an hour is very high. We don't make much money on gas. We work on very small margin. The reason I'm here, I'm asking if the town of Arlington, they will allow self-service. Self-service will open up money door for us. We can hire female person, older person, retired person, so we'll have more opportunity for hiring employees. With dependent on a young generation, it's gotten very tough. That's the reason I'm here. And I like to keep my pumps. The pumps, we depend on them. But if it's going to get to be it's trouble for us in managing employees' problems, I will give it up. I stick with my repair, give up the gas. The gas, I don't make really money on it. So please consider it for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the board with a comment? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here for the Citizens Open Forum? Seeing none. Open forum is closed. We already did number 12, moving on.
Does he understand this is a bylaw change? This would require quite a process.
Adam?
Yeah, Eli and I have spoken a number of times, and I sort of walked through the brief history since I've been here of dialogues regarding self-serve versus full-serve, and told him that at the very least, he should bring his concerns to the board, as the avenue to changing it would be through the board before going to town meeting. So I can talk further with Eli about the process, but he does know that it would take further action than just the board. It would take town meeting.
Okay. Okay, sorry,
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I didn't know how to handle that one, so thank you.
I'm not getting anything pulling up.
So
What did I do wrong?
So you're kind of on my new business. If we click here, see how we've got Select Board and Board of Selectmen with the same date?
So I have to
Choose
go-
a Select Board. Yeah.
Sorry.
I know, I had the
I've
same
been
problem.
flying solo, and I was like, this isn't right.
Yep. Next up is the Bus Rapid Transit Pilot. And first up, we've got recommendation, we've got the presentation from the town manager, and then we're going to go into a discussion where we're going to hear from anyone who's here who wants to talk about it, and the board, of course.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ready for me to?
Yes, please.
So the presentation up on the screen is slightly amended from the presentation you have before you. Nothing really substantive, just some things might look different than we have on the screen. So as the board is aware, the town received the Bar Foundation grant as part of a larger regional effort of, I believe, 3 communities who received Bar Foundation grants to test and study and hopefully get to a pilot of bus rapid transit in their communities to try to improve bus service on particular corridors in the greater Boston region. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the process that we followed since receiving that grant this year, talk about some of the concepts of bus rapid transit, and then, most importantly, go over the actual recommendations for the pilot that have been formulated and are now being recommended to be implemented in October. So we can go to the next slide, Doug. So very quickly, we started working in earnest on this back late spring, early summer, in April and June, doing data collection, parking data collection, queue collection, traffic data collection. Then held an educational forum back in May in Town Hall, very well-attended forum, to talk about what bus rapid transit or what BRT is. We then did a lot of work. We hired VHB, design firm, to produce or develop corridor scenarios that we could take a look at and analyze. Then on August 15th, we had a further forum. Very hot night, but still well-attended with a lot of good feedback on the various scenarios or concepts that we put forward. Throughout this time period, we've continued to have stakeholder meetings in East Arlington, trying to focus on meetings with the business community, immediate abutters to the corridor that we're talking about. Going forward, we're looking at implementation. What we want to do is have this pilot run from October 9th through November 12th, so very soon we're ready for implementation. Following that, we want to evaluate the pilot. We want to measure bus times, travel times. We're going to measure reliability, and we want to measure impacts on traffic in general. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further on in the presentation. And then November 14th, we'll have a final forum to get feedback from the public regarding the actual success or challenges or concerns regarding the pilot. You can go to the next slide. You can go one more. So a little bit of just overview. Why are we doing this? From a regional perspective, I think we all know that the regional economy continues to grow. More and more people are moving to the greater Boston region. Has produced a lot of challenges for us. We talk a lot about housing. The board also hears a lot about traffic. So that's not just an Arlington problem, it's a regional problem. There's more and more congestion, and we need to look at creative ways to try to solve that. One way to solve that is getting more people on transit. It's an efficient means of transporting people, and it's a good sustainable way to reduce congestion. And if more people are in buses and off cars, you can actually create space for people to park if more people are taking the bus. However, as we all know, one of the major challenges with bus service, which is Arlington's primary source of transit, is that we do suffer from delays and reliability issues. So specifically to Arlington on the next slide, on the Mass Ave corridor, basically from the depot and the Heights down through the Cambridge line, at the 50th percentile, we see buses running 3 to 5 minutes behind schedule, but at the 90th percentile, we see buses running anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes behind schedule, which is a pretty significant delay getting down the corridor. So what causes this? There's long wait times, there's overcrowding, there's bus bunching. I think those are all interrelated to one another. And these are things that we're trying to address by testing this pilot and see if we can improve on some of these problems. Next slide. So what do we want to do? We want to improve overall traffic flow. We want to reduce travel time if you're taking the bus, and we want to increase reliability. Next slide. So one question we've heard a lot about is why are we focusing on just the buses? What about other people who don't ride the bus? And I think that's a fair question. But other bus rapid transit pilots have demonstrated this, both locally and across the nation, that if you put more people on the bus, you can actually help reduce congestion and make everybody's commute better by taking, again, people out of cars and putting them onto the bus. We don't expect there to be, again, any impact on travel time for cars. In fact, you'll see when we get into some of the details, there could actually be some opportunities for cars to travel a little bit more smoothly with some of the changes we're going to be recommending during this pilot. We also feel that the particular treatments we're recommending reduce conflict with bike lane travel. As the bus performs now, as you're probably aware, the bus, as it comes in and out of the travel lane into the bus stop, crosses the bike lane, which creates a regular conflict with bike travelers. I'll talk a little bit more when we get into the design details about how this mitigates that to some degree. Again, we don't expect any impacts on access out of side streets based on the infrequency of the buses. And we also have tried to give really due consideration to parking demand along the corridor, which again is not specific to the bus, but for people who are in their cars. So next slide. So what are we going to do? We're looking at Mass Ave eastbound only. I think there has been some confusion as we've had these public discussions of whether or not we're looking westbound as well. We are definitely focusing Mass Ave eastbound, and we are focusing on the Lake Street intersection down to the Alewife Brook Parkway. That is the pilot area that we're focusing on. We are looking to do minimal construction, utilize cones, make changes to traffic signals, and as well as doing education and enforcement during the pilot. And again, it's just for basically that month of October 9th to November 12th for the morning commute, 6 to 9 a.m. eastbound. Some of the features we're going to propose are a bus Q-jump lane at Lake Street and Alewife Brook Parkway. A Q-jump basically means you use existing space in the roadway to get the bus around traffic, around congestion, and get it ahead of that traffic. So we can either access a bus stop or get to wherever its next point is ahead of traffic. We're talking about a bus stop relocation at Lake Street, and then we're talking about a dedicated bus lane that would start at Varnum Street and run all the way down to the Alewife Brook Parkway. So next slide. You know what? I'm going to actually let me skip ahead for continuity's sake here. Go back. I think I've already talked about this. One more. There we go. So specifically at Mass Ave and Lake Street, what our proposal is to move the bus stop that's currently located in front of the Capitol Theater and move it across Lake Street in front of the next block. So it would be basically you call it a far side relocation of the bus stop. It would move to the far side of the intersection. And what that would require is repurposing the 3 parking spaces that are across Lake Street in front of what is Christo's. I believe there's a nail salon, a hot pot, as well as what is right now the vacant former Bistro Duet. For the period of this pilot, we would move that bus stop permanently. That would not be 6 to 9 a.m. That would be all day during the period of the pilot, because the MBTA doesn't like to confuse bus riders by having stops move back and forth for different times of the day. The idea in doing that is you reduce the 3 stops that the buses has to make: stopping in traffic, stopping at the bus stop, stopping at the light again before it proceeds. What we hope to do here is have the bus access the right turn lane, use it as a through lane or a Q jump lane. It can go directly across the intersection and into the bus stop. And that's an example of what I mentioned earlier, where by not having to pull in and then pull back out into traffic again, that can actually both get the bus moving faster as well as reduce congestion for vehicles. One other thing we're going to do at this intersection is the MBTA is going to purchase and install transit signal priority, or TSP as it's called, at this intersection. And what that means is there will be a device on the bus, on every bus, as well as a device on our signals that will sense when a bus is approaching the light. And if it's green and the bus is approaching, it will extend that green by somewhere between 7 to 10 seconds. So the bus has a better opportunity to get through the light. It's similar to when you see the fire trucks or police cars use that technology to override the lights. This won't override the entire light system, but it'll extend the green for enough seconds to try to get the bus through. So if we go to the next slide, we have this graphic.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Just because they have this problem up in Woburn on exit 36, that, my question would be, that's supposed to be a bus, it being there will queue it up. Say something's there, like a delivery truck for a place called Alexandria's, and that's sitting there, and sitting there for a long period of time. Will the TSP pick that up? Like, is it gonna be sensitive to that a certain weight has to pull in and then move versus if there's a dead weight large truck there?
It's not a visual or a size sensor, it's actually a point-to-point sensor. So it's like a cell phone calling a cell phone.
So it would have to be the truck the size of the bus to trigger it?
No, for a vehicle to trigger it, it would have to have a device that communicates with the signal.
Okay, thank you.
So it's device to
Thank
device.
you.
It's like communication.
I misunderstood.
No,
Thank
that's,
you.
most of our traffic signals have visual sensors.
Yeah,
so
because
that's
that's what happens up at exit 36. It gets triggered sometimes by non-emergency vehicles, and then, but anyways.
So this should be device to
Okay.
device. So this graphically represents what we're talking about. You can see the bus would be in the travel lane. It would then be able to use what is the existing right turn lane to enter. It could then get up, it would have to remain behind cars in that right turn lane, but then could go straight across, adjacent to any other cars that are going straight, and access the relocated bus stop on the far side of the intersection. So from there, you can see the arrow pointing up. It would then have to re-enter the travel lane. Though presumably what we expect, based on the data, is it would enter that bus stop, on board, off board, the queue would be through, and it would be able to travel again without being stuck in that congestion for a long period of time. So you can see examples of some of the signage that we will use. We'll put up an MBTA bus stop move sign in front of the Capitol Theater. We will have the right lane must turn right, which I believe is already there, but add except bus there, so that makes it clear that the bus is allowed to do that. And then we will also properly sign the relocated bus stop so that it's clear. We won't paint the ground, but we'll make it clear through signs that it is a bus stop. So that's sort of the first area that we're recommending a treatment for. So if we move on to the next slide.
Did you questions now?
Yeah.
When you said right lane only except for bus, during this time, is that going to be used as a right turn?
Yes. Yeah,
So
the
it'll be
bus is gonna
buses
have to
and
share
right
it.
turns.
So bus straight, cars right turn lane. So the next section we're looking at is between Varnum Street and the Alewife Brook Parkway. We looked at this as an opportunity to use the parking lane. The parking data that was collected by the MAPC early on during the data gathering phase shows very low utilization of the parking spaces on this portion of the corridor from the 6 to 9 a.m. hour between Varnum Street and the Alewife Brook Parkway. So what we want to do is create a travel lane for the bus in the parking lane from 6 to 9 a.m. And that would, the minimal construction I mentioned earlier is the removal of the bump out that was installed as part of the Mass Ave redesign project to allow for the bus to completely access that parking lane all the way down to the Alewife Brook Parkway. So this one is graphically, easier to show this graphically. So you can see at Varnum Street, it's right at the beginning, the bus would come around that bump out. We would have both that first sign that talks about the right lane being for buses only and the hours it can be used. We'd use one of our variable message boards at the start of that lane, probably right at the start of it, so the bus could come in around that so people know it's for buses only. It would then continue all the way down that lane to the next signalized intersection of Teal and Thorndike. So it would be able to go right past the queue, access the bus stop at Teal and Thorndike. It would then go again through that light, stay in that parking lane, all the way down into, gets to the next bus stop in front of the automotive businesses right across the street from the CVS and the Monotony Grill. And then throughout the corridor, you can see there's, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's arrows showing streets that are two-way or one-way. Any street that would have traffic coming out, so either the two-way streets or the one-way dumping onto Mass Ave, will have the sign that's labeled as number 4, cautioning drivers to the fact that they'll be crossing a bus lane during those hours. So those will be put on those side streets so that drivers are aware that that's happening. The way we're going to lay this out is putting a cone approximately every 20 feet for this stretch where we're going to have the lane. And we're going to put that cone on the outside of the bike lane. So there is enough space for the bus to ride between the curb without hitting the bike lane, without being in the bike lane. But the engineers and other experts we had on the team thought that we would provide further protection between vehicular traffic and the bus by putting the cone on the outside of the bike lane, as well as the fact that T, or the MBTA, will instruct bus drivers to not pass bikes if they are in the bike lane and the bus is approaching from behind. So buses won't pass bikes, and in this section of Mass Ave, based on the downhill slant, it seems to be that bikes will likely be moving as fast or faster than the buses anyway, so it should not be creating a problem. So we think it actually creates, it's not really a shared bike lane, because we think the buses will be able to stay in their parking lane. So what am I missing here? Any questions about this segment?
So as they approach Cambridge, do they have that same TSP, was it? The same device that holds the green light for them?
So not yet, and that's the next segment to describe is what we're going to do there.
Okay.
But not, we won't have TSP yet.
Okay.
Before the bus in the lane gets to Ellisbrook Parkway, they have to rejoin that right turn only, right? Or are they taking the whole right turn only lane there?
So the next segment answers that question too.
Okay. And then, is the cones on the roadway side of the bike lanes?
Yes.
So the bike lane and the bus lane are together?
Lane are contained by the cones.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Joe, then Kevin.
Thank you for this. I appreciate that there's been some sensitivity here to some of the businesses along the corridor that do rely on a lot of morning business, particularly up by Capitol Square and here on this segment as well. I noticed that we're further down from Arlington Diner. Has there been any, I know there's been analysis around the parking utilization at this time. Has there been any analysis of any establishments that have drop-off or pickup needs at this time?
I don't think there are any on this stretch.
Okay.
Not that we have looked business by business. The only store that has hours, it has a lot of open hours is the bait shop, and there is a lot of parking availability on the westbound lane, so there should still be parking availability for access to the bait shop.
And the school?
The school that my children attend?
I was trying to avoid it.
It's 2 blocks before.
Okay.
That's between Milton and Melrose and Egerton or Chandler.
So I want to maybe try to stick the presentation a little bit and then try to get to, so if we have questions about the steps, and then we'll get to another set of questions later. Is it? Sure.
My question was just if any of the businesses were open. I think that just piggybacks on what Joe asked.
Kevin, do you have any?
Mine was, is there some sort of sign so bikers know they can still use the bike lane?
That's a good question.
The previous one, yeah, see you sign number 1, I noticed it said bikes okay at the bottom there.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, it will, see, maybe there, I don't know if there's an MUTCD way to make that larger, but that is the representation.
Okay. Thank you.
So if we go to the next one, Doug. So this is also a very tricky portion of it, the intersection of the Ellisbrook Parkway. So the space, the intersection of the parkway is owned by the state's Department of Conservation and Recreation, but the signals are owned and operated by the city of Cambridge. And it's Arlington trying to put buses through faster. So this was probably ultimately the most technically complicated site to try to get parties on board. That said, Cambridge and DCR were very, very cooperative. So what we have agreed on through all parties is changing the signals to become split phase, which means that eastbound and westbound from Cambridge each get their own direction. And the reason we're doing that is we want to be able to allow the buses to come through the right turn lane and be able to go straight or take a right turn if they're the 79 or the 350. The signals and the signal controller at the Ellisbrook Parkway are very old, so they're not sort of technically up to the task of taking on transit signal priority right now or TSP right now. Cambridge does have midterm or a little bit longer term plans of fully upgrading all of that technology and those signals. So they're they have been very cooperative with this and want to keep talking so that if this pilot is successful, we can do something more permanent and better at that intersection. So if you go to the next slide, Doug. This again shows the graphic representation. So this picks up a little bit where we left off in the last picture. You'll see we'll use a sign at the start of the median strip over the bridge that says new traffic pattern ahead. We'll have a lane. So right now there is a left turn only lane, and then a center lane that's for through traffic, and then a right turn only lane. I believe that's the way it's laid out. What we're going to be able to do here is have a left turn in straight, because it's going to have a split phase. There won't be any oncoming traffic, one straight lane, and then the right turn only with buses being able to go straight through. And you can see, right lane must turn right, except bus. And what we'll be able to do is the 79 and the 350 will be able to take their right turns to access Alewife, and then the 77 will be able to use that right turn lane, again, access a Q jump, go right across the intersection, and then you can see the highlighted blue in the far right of the screen is the next bus stop in Cambridge. And Cambridge is comfortable with the bus continuing straight through across the intersection into that bus stop. So we feel that'll pretty significantly, the connection of it all pretty significantly enhance the ability of the bus to get through that intersection during the morning commute. Does that answer the question you had, Kevin, about how it accesses it?
Yes, thank you.
I feel bad, we get all these color charts. Sorry, go ahead.
Next slide, Doug. So one other thing we're going to do, it's outside of the project limits, but the T is planning on installing TSP at the Jason Mass and Mill intersection. That they saw that as being an intersection that could benefit from having TSP, so they're going to also buy and purchase and install that equipment at Jason Mill and Mass. Next slide. And then going forward, I think I just mentioned this, we're going to continue to work at the Parkway with Cambridge and DCR to see what improvements can be made. Depending on the success of this pilot, excuse me, we want to look at whether or not BRT could be used in any manner on Broadway to help the 87 get down Broadway into Somerville and down to Davis Square faster. We do want to look, we heard a lot from people, especially at the first forum we had, about why we were focusing on East Arlington and not looking at other parts of the corridor in Arlington for bus improvements. So we want to continue to take a look at that. I think we saw, for the purposes of this grant and this pilot, the biggest bang for our buck to make these improvements in East Arlington. But we are interested in continuing to study where broader applications might be appropriate. We want to continue to work with the T to see where adding TSP to other signals might work. There are some other candidates. The challenge is they like for the bus stops to be far side, and we have some limiting factors of being able to move bus stops to all far sides just based on the current land use around some intersections, but we're going to continue to work on that. One thing we could look at, which is a little more tricky, is level platform boarding. They've done that in Everett. What that does is they actually have a bus stop that has a raised platform, and then the bus pulls up onto a raised ramp, and you create level platform boarding so that it's more accessible and for quicker boarding. Probably longer term, a little more complicated, but as a way to get the bus moving faster. And then finally, we've actually already started having initial conversations with the T and their consultant, Cubic, to implement an off-board fare collection system, again, to speed up the onboarding process. This basically would mean if you don't have a Charlie card, instead of having to fiddle around with getting dollars and coins into the machine, you'd be able to pay at a little cubicle or not cubicle, kiosk, excuse me. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but likely you get a little receipt with a scan code, you can scan it in the bus, and it makes things move faster. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And I think, what do we have? That's it.
Oh, my favorite slide.
Yeah. So
Give me
with
some
that,
color, pink and white.
I'm happy to answer any questions you have now, or hear from the business owners, or whatever the board prefers.
Questions from the board?
Just comment.
Comments from the board?
So I actually wasn't able to access attachments, so I'm seeing this new for the first time. And I'm good. I do like what I see because I had some horror stories in my mind of what we could. Since this has come in, I've spoken to a lot of business owners, a lot of people that are concerned about it. From the start, I've said that, you know, the parking spaces at the Capitol Square area are vital to the businesses there, and I didn't think I could get on board with any changes there. I'm glad to see that that stayed in. So I did go out there yesterday at 8:30 in the morning. I was going to ride the bus from my office, but then I realized I had no money. So I got in my car and I drove down Mass Ave. And one thing that I noticed is that there was really no traffic all the way down, at least I drove all the way from the Heights. I didn't have a lot of delay. I got to Capitol Square thinking, based on what the discussions about this program, that there was going to be a big backup at Lake Street. I didn't see that. So, you know, I didn't see that Lake Street was the major issue. There was no cars parked at Capitol Square, so I got to see what it would have looked like for a bus to pull in if that was a bus lane. And I didn't see a whole lot of, you know, added time for that. I do think that the proposal at Lake Street, you know, no one wants to repurpose, as you say, parking spots, but for this limited time, for the businesses that aren't open at that time, I think that is workable. So the one thing that I did notice is once I got past Lake Street, both lanes of traffic stopped right there. So I was fearful that we were going to have some sort of a bus lane in one of those two, because there was nowhere to put any more cars. So once you got over all the way down, I had thought that I would go through Lake Street, there'd be a little flow, and then you'd stop at 16, and that wasn't the case. And it was to the point where I actually pulled over and got on a line bike and rode the rest of the way to observe the rest of the traffic. So assuming that, you know, the parking statistics are correct for this area, I think having the bus lane where it's put is acceptable. You know, it doesn't seem to have that much disruption of the traffic because there was literally nowhere to put any more cars in that section. So if we took any space from those two lanes, you know, you're going to be backed up to the center. So based on that, you know, I do like what I'm seeing here. You know, one thing that I did notice is, by far, as you mentioned, and this is obvious, the bicyclists fly through there. So anything we can do in this area to promote more bicycle traffic would be good. You know, I think we could rework the area around, right at Ellwife Brook, to try to, if there's a little land that we could take from the sidewalk area to put a bike lane going around it, it would be good because of bottlenecks there. I saw 4 buses that were all in that lane, from Lake Street to Ellwife Brook. There were 477 buses. They're all about a quarter to half full. To me, it's part of this when I hear that buses are consistently 20 minutes late. I think at some point the MBTA has to kind of do some quality control as to their timing schedules and how often they send the buses out there. Because certainly a bus can take up some space in traffic too. If we have 4 buses, that'll only about 8 cars. But as is, you know, I think for a limited purpose, since the major disruptions that were first proposed that could have caused problems in this area could, because it definitely needs it. It needs, so it was the first time I've had experience down in that area at that time of day. And, you know, it's backed up. And if we can get the buses out of the lane, it will push the traffic along a little bit. And certainly good to promote more renewable and clean energy in the wake of a superstorm every month now. So I am happy with the final proposal. I'm glad that some of the scarier parts of the proposals didn't make it into the final cut.
Thank you. Actually, I think Kevin got you before.
No,
sorry.
I'm good.
Diane.
Just one question, and I understand what my colleague, Mr. Hurd, is saying about the buses, and one of the things we'd need to find out is, I know sometimes, talking individuals in the Carmen's Union, they're told to flush out 3-4 buses, not necessarily to pick up everybody in Arlington on the 77, but it's to get to that bus to go somewhere else. So if there's some way that the MBTA can track that, if that's that process of, you know, reallocating the fleet, or if they really are inundating the system and sending out 4 buses at a quarter percent full. Only where they're agreeing to do all these other things. Because I have asked that question in the past. I'm like, how come I saw 379s? But when I talk to members of the Common Union, they're like, we're really being sent out to get to the next, because they have certain routes they can do 72, 62, 72, 67, 79. So anyways. And then the other thing is, to me, the peak, unless there's inclement weather, I know we're doing this from 6A to 9A. To me, the peak, unless there's snow or rain or anything like that, then literally, I'm sitting at the light right after Walgreens at Mass Ave, and I'm inching my way down. Where it's only 4 days, to me, the height of traffic down there when you see this on a good day is like 7:40 till about 8:45 a.m., which unfortunately is right in the middle of shift change. And I don't know if maybe just for at least one of those days, especially, is one of those days a school day? Are all of them a school day? Is one a holiday? What's 9 through 12? What days of the week?
Oh, it's a whole month. It's 10, 12 through 11, 12.
Well,
So it's
as
all-
soon as we could, and especially in terms of, when school's in session, Hardy School, because one of the things that I see down there when the weather is good, between that 7:45 to 8:45 timeframe, is it's almost like I'm going to date myself, Super Mario game in terms of when I'm going eastbound and I'm stopped on Lake Street, and then, some people on bicyclists, not all, and I almost close my eyes because I don't want to see it. The majority of them stop when we stop, but a lot of them, because that delayed green on the westbound side to go left onto Lake, it literally is, I'm afraid I'm going to see. So I don't know if, we can't do it for the whole month. I know we can't do that. We can't do it for all 20 days of school or 25 days, whatever that equates to, but maybe somewhere in the beginning, I'll leave that to you and the chief, if there's any way we can get some sort of,
We will have a detail at Lake and Mass. We'll have probably 2 to 3 details along the runway or the parking, the dedicated bus lane. So we will have pretty significant police resources out at least for the first week or two of the pilot, and
That's
then we'll
fine.
decide.
No, we
from
can't
there.
do it the whole month. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Greeley?
So, end result, would we be hoping to run this from the Heights to Cambridge?
I think we would, I'm not the data expert, I don't want to claim to be. My sense is that there isn't compelling enough data to do any type of dedicated bus lane further up the avenue. I do think that there could be a lot of benefits if we use some of the signal technology to get buses through intersections faster. Maybe some queue jumps. There might be some areas where we could allow buses to sneak around the traffic and get ahead. So I think my answer would be there could be some opportunities all the way up to the Heights, probably not in any instance using the parking lane like we have.
And of the 19 spaces we are repurposing, as in no parking, 6 to 9, how many are handicapped spaces?
I think for that stretch, there's one.
Just one?
Yeah. I can verify that, but I think it's one.
And would we move that around the corner or something, or just a handicapped person can't park there from 6 to 9?
Let me get you a better answer on that. We should think about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I think we'll go to our audience. I have at least one woman who I think had indicated to Marie who wanted to speak, and anyone else who's here who wanted to talk on the pilot? Adam? Oh, wait, no.
I think
is it
Claire from
are you here?
Quebrada was here. Here she is. Hello.
So
Could you introduce yourself and pull down the mic and talk into it?
I'm
Just give it point it at you.
I'm
Thank
Claire
you.
Rabin from Quebrada Baking
Welcome.
Company. And I've been involved in going to a lot of the meetings and talking to Adam and discussing the fact of the loss of parking would be catastrophic to Quebrada and to businesses that are open during that time. And there has been a lot of back and forth on it. In the process, we we had a petition that we had out at the bakery in Capitol Square, and we gathered over 700 signatures of customers and supporters of the fact that losing the parking would be really bad for the business district. So I want to present these signatures to you, and Richard, I think, was going to speak a little bit too.
Well,
Could you introduce yourself, please?
yes, I'm Richard Freeman.
Thank you.
We own and operate the Capitol Theater and own the Capitol Block. I could say for myself, and I think for others, that we're very pleased the way we were able to collaborate with the town. It was a long process, and the town, I think, goes out of its way to be inclusive with all different stakeholders. It's a cliche, but stakeholders involved. And I think the result is satisfactory because there are a lot of different considerations you had to accomplish. And the fact that you did listen to our concerns in the East Arlington business community, we very much appreciate. So we want this to succeed because anything that improves the traffic situation at Mass Ave is a boon. I know the whole process was, it consisted of fits and starts, and which is natural and normal in these processes, and communications and miscommunications and misunderstandings. But I think in the end, I'm very pleased with the way everybody did come together on this. So kudos to those who are responsible for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. I've got a, thank you. I've got a question for you when you get back to the mic. So I just want to understand, so the plan that we just saw, the parking spaces that are moved there, those are what this, the parking spaces on the, like, so, and also I just want to clarify. So all the spaces that are being removed are the other side of Lake Street from your business, right? And
That was up in discussion for a while.
yes.
with Adam.
And so in the end, is this okay or is this not okay? Oh, it is.
This is very good for K-Brada, but we, as in East Arlington community, we're aware that, you know, the Arlington Diner will be impacted, the other businesses down there will be impacted. So to keep in mind when the final plan is made, that this is all very critical to the businesses, that we don't lose that small amount of parking we have, because it isn't much to begin with. So, but thank you all. We really appreciate you listening to us.
Thank you. I've never got a petition before that smells like coffee.
Well,
It's really quite
I was gonna ask if we had any K-Brada cookies.
There should be a smell of popcorn in some of those, too.
That didn't come through on first. Sure. So come on up to the front. Yep, it definitely is. Well, I'll just say that in general, as we're going to be encouraging people to come up, we're going to invite you to introduce yourself and avoid repetition as you can. Thank you.
Thanks.
And generally, under 3 minutes.
Okay, and just a couple of words. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse tonight.
You are.
My name is Julia Wallers. I'm with the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. IGDP, we're a global nonprofit that works around the world to on sustainable transportation projects like BRT, bike share, rapid transit. We're part of the Bar Foundation grant team that's been supporting these pilots here in Arlington, Cambridge, Watertown, and also Everett. So thanks, Adam. You did a great job presenting this. It's been a real pleasure to work with the town. I've been super impressed with the planners and the staff here. I just wanted to say, add a layer to this pilot that in addition to being a service pilot to improve service, it's really a lot about branding and celebrating transit and celebrating the bus. We talk a lot about how 2018 has been year of the bus. So there's been so much momentum around how can we leverage bus service from being the sort of last resort, you know, lousy option to really something that's attractive, an option that people want to take. Just to give an example, in Everett, the pilot, which did launch in, well, they've had a dedicated lane for over a year, but with the grant, they actually did a level boarding platform, like Adam mentioned. And on one day, we actually did what's called a flower bomb of the stops and decked out one of the shelters in flowers. So to juxtapose that next to, you know, an old decrepit maybe there's a bench, maybe not, looking like a last resort to looking like you could have a wedding there. That's really what we're trying to do, is draw attention and excitement to buses, and we are absolutely doing that here in Arlington. In fact, there's a component of this grant to the Artists Associations, and Artists Association with Cecily Miller, so you'll see, I think, 6 shelters. There's a handful of them up and down this corridor that local artists will be doing installations with to draw attention and engagement and really facilitate these themes of sustainability and speed and community. So there's a lot of storytelling, a lot of engagement. Absolutely improving the service is paramount to all of this, but just making it fun and a human experience is also what we're trying to do. So lots to look forward to with that, and we do a big, what we're calling, we need a better word for a launch event on October 16th. We'll have street teams out wearing these RLBRT branded shirts, surveying people, asking, what do you think? How do you like this? Do you think it's saving you time? Because often what we find is if you compare the quantitative data of how much faster the buses are traveling and compare that to what people say, the perception of it is almost more valuable than the actual data. In Roslindale, on the pilot they did there on Washington Street, people would say, this dedicated lane has saved me 45 minutes on my commute. And that's what it felt like. Really, it was like 5. But the feeling of just cruising by, not sitting there in traffic, really changes the bus experience. And that's what these pilots are doing. And we're really thrilled that Arlington is on board to try that on Mass Ave. So that's what pilots are for, trying it. So kudos to you guys all for giving it a go. And we're looking forward to getting started.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam.
Thank you. My name's Adam Oster. I'm not here representing anybody. I live in East Arlington. I live right down by the brook. My neighborhood is a part of Precinct 3, which I happen to represent at town meeting. And I wanted to say 2 things. One is that it's great to see this sort of experimental attitude take hold. I moved to town in 1995, and subsequent experiences felt a lot like trench warfare. We were fighting over the significance of every single inch of the width of Mass Ave at one point. And this feels like I'm in a laboratory and people are saying, let's try this and see what happens. And I personally prefer that. I think it's better for the town. The other thing I wanted to do to introduce into this debate, which I hope will be ongoing, this discussion of how we can improve things, is that motor vehicle traffic and emissions from motor vehicles are implicated in a problem that threatens my neighborhood, which is climate change. When I moved in 95, shortly afterwards, a developer built the hotel, which we have today on the corner. And he was able to, whether this is wise or not, I don't know, but he was able to situate a garage underneath in basically what is the basement. 10, 15 years later, when the hotel wanted to expand, they couldn't do that. They had to build their new wing on stilts so that they could collect the rainwater and return it to the ground to be recharged, and there would be no additional flooding impact. And in fact, that is starting to affect some of my neighbors as well. I received a notice from the Conservation Commission about someone on Henderson Street who wanted to build an addition on a home, and the proposal was very similar. There was no basement on the addition. There was, just stilts, and I assume that is now a Conservation Commission requirement, although I don't know exactly what the mechanics are. The climate has changed. The behavior of the water has changed. The FEMA flood maps have changed. We're experiencing this now. So I don't want to oversell it and say, let's do this bus pilot to save my neighborhood, but in a way I do, because it needs to be part of the solution, and we need to consider pretty much anything that isn't absolutely crazy and give it a try when we can. So I hope that you're going to support this. I certainly do. I want to thank the town for moving ahead with this and taking the opportunity.
Thank you. Bob? Yes, please.
Bob Radosh, Columbia Road. It's about time. From day one of the Mass Ave project, I was pushing to have that bus stop on the other side of Lake Street because of all the confusion that brings about at that intersection. But I was told, I have it in writing, the reason we didn't do that was because one of the merchants over there needed that for his loading dock and other reasons to park his truck all day. The question is, has that been resolved? Is he still going to need to use that parking space in front of Fruit Stew?
You want me to try to answer that?
Give it a go.
I guess maybe that answer in writing was before my time. I know there was a lot of consternation for years and years about the illegal parking of the food truck in front of that store for well beyond the time limits. So I know that eventually via enforcement we were able to address that. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
as I see it, it's no longer an issue.
All right, so, but when it's not being, well, it's going to be the bus stop now. That's going to be permanent, I hope.
Well, everything we saw tonight, immediately after November 12th, will revert to its original form, and then we will evaluate how well it.
Except the bus stop will stay on.
No, we will further evaluate the bus stop.
Okay, so that could come back in front of the Capitol.
Yeah, but I want to be clear. I mean, part of the promise of this is, we want it to be all successful, right? We want this all to work and to come back and say, this was wildly more successful than we thought, let's implement it officially forever. But we've promised everybody that we are going to evaluate it, that nothing's a fait accompli. So before, I can't sit here tonight and say it's going to stay there forever, because we want to evaluate it, see how it worked, and then make decisions.
But you did say something about the MTA or whatever they call themselves. They don't want to go back and forth on the locations of a bus stop.
During the pilot period.
During the pilot.
They didn't want it to be 6 to 9 a.m. on one side of the street, rest of the day the other side.
Okay.
So during that month-long period, it will stay in that location all day.
And I think there still will be 2 lanes from Lake Street down to Alewife. Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to talk about rapid transit? So yep, sure. Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Ray Jones, I live on Wyman Terrace. I don't actually ride the bus very often. I bike because it's really fast. But I do want to say I have experience with shared bus bike lanes, and they are great. They reduce the conflict enormously. Almost always the bike can keep up or catch up to the bus. I think it's a great idea, and I think this is a wonderful plan. Thank you.
Thank you. As a comment to the board, I'll note that I do take the 77 bus to work sometimes.
So move receipt.
You want approval to the pilot?
An endorsement from the board would be nice to have.
Move we endorse.
Second.
Motion second. Further conversation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, discussion approval, National Grid correspondence, gas permits and select board response. Town Council, Mr. Heim.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, you've seen the correspondence from National Grid. It was addressed to the town manager, but I think that was probably because a similar letter was sent out to a number of municipalities. While the boards wouldn't necessarily be required to authorize a response from the town manager, I think that because this is based on the board's policy, I drafted a response that I hope addresses the many things that I would expect the board to take issue with National Grid's correspondence to the manager, probably intended for all of you. So if there are any questions about it, I'd be happy to address them, but I think the sum of the response is that the select board, its primary concern is in fact public safety, and that National Grid has been a partner that we've tried to work with effectively on many, many issues, understanding the challenges that they face with an aging infrastructure. But with that said, this board has heard many, many complaints about gas leaks throughout Arlington, that there's a wider and longer context to this, and that the board's policy is born out of the evidence that was presented by the steelworkers, and in the absence of other argument and evidence, the board took a position that they feel is necessary to help protect Arlington residents. So if there are any questions or are there any comments, obviously I'm happy to edit this or change this or table this, but I thought it was important to bring before the board given the nature of at least some of the more accusatory remarks made by National Grid.
Mrs. Mahan.
Shocking. I do want to say thank you to the town manager and town council for handling yet another unforeseen issue. I do want to point out that the correspondence from National Grid on September 4th, 2018, in my personal opinion, is pretty much indicative of what not only the United Steelworkers, 12,002, 5, 6, et cetera, but also many other elected officials across the Commonwealth, as well as select boards, board of selectmen, and city councils. The letter is filled, in my opinion, with so many, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say lies, misrepresentations, untruths, falsehoods. That's the, PC way to say it. But it's also indicative, I think, of the way the negotiations commenced and have continued with the local USW, United Steelworkers, because basically what they're doing in this letter, to me, is kind of like bullying, and I think the town council outlined very distinctly the 4 main points that they were trying to accuse the town manager of as a result of this board's vote in terms of violating the State Ethics Commission. And I love the endangering the residents of the town in terms of, I provided my colleagues with, is anyone here from United Steelworker? Because I don't want to say, okay, considering that this has now risen to the office of the governor, the United Steelworkers and their officials met with Governor Baker today. I'm told it was a very good dialogue. I'm told that the governor had his chief of staff there and other ancillary staff that would be relevant to be in the room. And the governor asked at the end of the meeting if the steelworkers could, because they put forth to him several courses of action they would like him to take, beyond just imposing a moratorium. And one of the points that was told to me, I was not at the meeting, so, but I did speak to many who were there, that the governor, through his staff, was under the impression he had 6 to 8 certified licensed inspectors out of DPU, because one of the big things that we're concerned about and why we voted for this is the quality of craftsmen and women that are coming out, and if they're qualified to do it to ensure the safety of Arlington residents, as well as the large equipment that are coming out with no inspection stickers and no license plates. So he was under the impression there were 6 to 8, and USW informed them that there's 3 positions in DPU to do this kind of inspection work. One person's out on an extended medical issue, and the other 2 are certified for meters. They're not certified for gas lines or anything like that. To that end, our Attorney General, well, I'm going beyond that, so I just wanted to say that I'm not surprised by the tone, the accusations made against the town manager, town of Arlington, and I do appreciate Doug's detailed response, but I especially like that, because I've seen some other cities and towns' response to me were kind of really right up front, in your face. Here's the 4 things that you accused us of, or the town manager, which are blatantly untrue. So.
Is there a motion? Mr. Greeley.
Well, I want to discuss a subject related to this. I'm not sure whether now is the time to do it.
Is it the moratorium?
Yes.
That's the next item. So
that's a specific one, though.
Yeah. So at the moment, my intent was, unless the board wishes to handle it otherwise, I'm flexible in this, was to talk about this letter first, resolve the letter, then talk about the moratorium.
Okay.
I'd like to move approval of Attorney Heim's response.
A motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there further discussion? seconded by Mr. Curo. Further discussion on the letter? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Moratorium. So we have did we get a written request for about the permits? I think we did.
2.
Yeah, we got 2 from Brian Callahan and Jeffrey Borstel, who are contractors. Are either of them here? First up is Brian Callahan, unless you have a strong preference for the other. Hi.
Brian Callahan, I want local construction.
Thank you. Speak into the mic. Welcome.
It's Brian Callahan Company, and I've lived here for 18 years and worked here exclusively for 18 years. I'm here requesting permits for a project that I started in the summer of 2017. The job is at the completion point. The only thing keeping me from putting them on the market is a gas line. I had the gas lines in hand, the gas permits in hand before the strike, but there was a delay because of the strike or lockout, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm requesting that you guys honor my original permits based on this delay. And they were approved. The house was designed for that. It's a Energy Star house, which is the highest you can get. So everything's gas equipment at 98%. And there's 4 units, so it's quite substantial. And it's across the park, across the street from the park at McLennan. So it's a fairly big project. And I was hoping you guys could see that this was not a matter that I could control. It was done a year before. It's completed now. It was permitted completely by the town and the gas company. And I'm asking for your help, basically. I could go into details, and
Okay. So I think unless the board has a different suggestion, I'm going to invite the 2 contractors to speak, then we can have a general discussion. Is that appropriate?
Can I ask just a quick
Yeah,
question?
it's questions for Mr. Callahan are very appropriate.
Very
Yeah.
direct. The 4 units, are any of them occupied currently?
No, I can't put them on the market.
No, I'm doing that for the record, for me. Thank you.
I'm trying to.
Mr. Greeley?
So can I ask through you, Mr. Chairman, to our town council, can we do this? Can we issue the permit, Mr. Council?
So the board's proclamation, Mr. Greeley, essentially is the board's policy. You resolved that, among other things, that that heightened scrutiny and safety inspections and monitoring work be done during the lockout, and that no new non-emergency permits for gas projects shall be issued by the select board. How the board chooses to direct us to interpret that, obviously, the gentleman is saying, I had these things sort of in the kitty, if you will. How the board interprets that is a matter of really policy itself. So what you passed was no new non-emergency permits for gas construction projects. I can't tell you how you want to sort of enforce that. I think that this is your policy, and you'll have to decide what you want to do.
I understand, but do we have the authority to issue permits?
You have the authority to issue this proclamation. You have the authority to, allow for the work to go forward as well.
Thank you.
My question is, but when we last discussed this, what I remember reading was that National Grid wasn't actually doing any new work. They're only doing emergency work at that time. And so if the town issues the permit, aren't you still in the same place because National Grid?
If I wasn't already permitted and didn't apply for this in September of 17, that would be the case. But I'm in contact with them now, and they're willing to do this upon approval of the town.
So they're not doing.
They still have an open permit in their hand, as far as they're concerned. The only thing they don't have is approval.
But so separate from the permit, though?
Yeah, no, they're willing to do this because they know that I did everything by right and waited my 6 months,
Yeah, it's just interesting. It just means that's new. Either One of the things I just don't know whether National Grid is actually doing this work yet, or whether they're telling you, just so you know, one of the things that National Grid will do is tell you, oh, blame it on the town, when in fact they're not. So I'm a little bit worried. I'm curious, you know, if we change our policy, whether or not National Grid's actually going to do the work, or if they're suddenly going to be like, oh, actually we're not doing this work after all.
Well, I'd be more shocked than you, but I have liaisons there that help me quite substantially, and they're telling me within 2 weeks they could have it in the ground. And in all the years I've done it, I would say more than 50% of private contractors have always put the gas in anyway, so they still have their force. It's just...
That's not true.
Well, but Ms. Martin, sorry.
I mean, at some point, I'd like to review them. It's really going far afield of...
Well, the Feeney brothers are still working there. They were here on Mass Ave.
Yeah, but they laid dead pipe. They never did live service. I work in the trade.
All right, I think you answered my question. I am still curious what National Grid's actual position is on that, but I understand that you can't tell me. I mean, I'm not saying you.
I
Yeah,
can't,
I know.
but they're telling, I mean, I have
I'm
several correspondents that said that we're simply waiting.
That's
Crew
the-
standing, but, you know, within 2 weeks, we'll have it.
That's the info I was looking for. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Callahan? All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Borstel.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
So I
Introduce
just
yourself,
opened
please.
up, my name's Jeff Borstel, and I own a property at 17 Ariel Street in Arlington. I just opened up a company in 2018, and this is one of my first projects, and I'm not able to begin the project because in order to get a building permit, I need a cut and cap permit from National Grid. So before the town will even review anything from me, I really can't get started, okay? So obviously, opening up my first company, I'm relatively young, 31, so one of my first projects, don't have enough money to buy it cash, so obviously I have debt involved, and it's a big financial burden on myself and my family. So just asking you guys if I can get a permit. I have written correspondence from National Grid saying that as long as the town of Arlington will issue a cut and cap permit, they will do the work. I know that some of you disagree with that, but I would at least like to know that if they do request that permit, that you guys would do that. It's an emergency to me because it's a financial strength. It's a financial burden on me and my family, but it may not seem like an emergency, like a gas leak or something like that, but I'm certainly feeling the pain of it, and my family is as well, so it's kind of hitting home. So.
Questions for Mr. Borstel?
When did you start the project?
I can't start the project.
So when did you purchase the property?
I purchased the property in early summer.
Specifically?
I think it was...
It's important to what
Yeah,
I
so
think
I
we're
think
going to talk about.
Yeah, I think it was early July it was. I should have brought that exact paperwork with me.
That's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, but obviously I'm carrying a lot of debt, so every month that goes by, it's...
I've got a very similar question. So do you actually think that National Grid is going to do the work if you get the permit, or do you think they're pointing the finger? Do you have any indication of?
I do. I mean, every time I reach out to them, I get a response back within that same day. And I would at least like to know that if I request, or if they request that being put in, they tell me that you guys will say, I'll do the work. You know, and it's an emergency to me. It's, so.
But you understand what I'm getting at in my question?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to figure out whether or not National Grid, or not even how much they're trying to use town residents to pressure us about something that they're displeased about.
It's not really, it's pressure. I'm not on either side of this, and I understand that it's a fight or disagreement between two parties that it really has nothing to do with me. I'm just caught in the crosshairs here, and it's really not fair to me and my family to be stuck in a dispute that really has nothing to do with me. I don't have an opinion either way. I really don't care who's right or who's wrong. I am just hurting financially because I'm stuck in the middle of an issue that I've never wanted. If I knew this was going to happen, I would never bought the property. You know, I just don't want to be in this situation.
Thank you. Questions for Doug?
Mr. Dunn, if I may just clarify one thing, and this is not as important, I think that the gentleman's position won't necessarily be affected by this, but for people who are watching, I want to make it clear to everybody that this is not a town of Arlington versus National Grid issue. Our issue in the select board's position is that because they don't have the workers who inspect lines, the question is the board expressed concern about the safety of this work being done without inspection? So I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that it's not the town versus National Grid. And some sort of
Are you guys issuing permits for emergencies?
Yes.
So what do you consider an emergency? I mean, I look at me hurting financially as an emergency.
Typically, it's life and safety.
It's a level 1 gas leak that could result in explosion.
Right. Well, I'm looking at this from my perspective as this is a huge emergency on my family because I'm carrying this.
Yeah, but would you want people out there that weren't qualified? We just had, a couple days ago, the Longwood Medical Area. Half of Beth Israel, they had to move all the patients away because the gas leak ran for an hour and a half, which meant explosions could have happened for an hour and a half. And the reason it happened is National Grid does not have the qualified workers out there, does not have the proper equipment and people who know how to use it. That's how they punctured the gas line, as well as they don't have what they say they would, either there or DPU inspectors out there overseeing to say, listen, you're not qualified to drive this big heavy piece of equipment, and you can't open up the hole that way because you're going to puncture the line. You have to make sure you put, the buffer underneath. So to me, the reason the board took this vote and that I advocated for so strongly and will continue, it's a matter of safety. That you're saying, well, I'm not in the middle of this, I don't care about, but if something comes out and something's done to your property, your neighbor's property, or something even far worse, we could have neighbors coming in saying, we know this gentleman thought it was an emergency, but you damaged my property, because there have been, the mayor of Malden, they had a massive breach, and she's not allowing anybody in. Town of Winchester last night just took a vote that, Wicked Locals clarified it, that they're doubling down because they've seen that the breaks they've had in Winchester, Church Street and Bacon Street, they've hit gas lines. And so they're making it, what National Grid, in my opinion, is trying to do is get individuals to get cities and towns to break this moratorium, because it is having, we now have the Attorney General all the way up getting involved in this. And she says, right, she's calling for an investigation. She started that.
Right, but we have an industry that's on hold, builders can't.
All right, I thought I was answering your question about your family. That's sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I know, but I don't want to go back and forth.
Yeah,
I want to wait till I can make, because what it is you and this other gentleman unwittingly, because it's happening in other cities and towns. Other cities and towns like Winchester are doubling down because of this tactic through National Grid. But my opinion is, and I can tell you I've seen it throughout the state, this is what National Grid is trying to do to try to water down these moratoriums. So,
Are there any other questions for Mr. Forstall? All right, thank you. Who wants to go? Comments? I was looking this way. Joe's first.
I just have a couple questions for the manager and town council. The first is, could you just, reiterate for the board and for everyone else watching this, what the current policy is around installing propane as a substitute for gas connections?
So, my understanding it is an allowable substitute. I don't know if you have any different opinion of that. I did do a cursory review with the assistant town manager and building inspector, and it is an allowable fuel source.
And are you seeing some applicants who during this time are actually availing themselves of that?
I know one property owner developer stated to me that they would seek a propane permit if this moratorium or lockout continued for a long period of time, but I'm not clear that permit has actually been pulled or not.
Okay. And the only other question I have, I know that there are 23 other cities and towns that have engaged in some form of a proclamation or an action. And when I read the release from the United Steelworkers, it sounds like there's actually a range there of what's been done. Have any other cities and towns found a way to provide adequate oversight, barring moratorium?
If they have, I'm not immediately aware of it.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
So I want to reiterate that the vote we took was public safety. And I still am concerned with the stories that we're hearing, that there is a public safety concern to allowing, you know, these installations on a large scale. I am revisiting a little bit the idea of what, you know, when we came up for a discussion before, we talked about open permits, and we said that there was no open permits. And I think I had a kind of closed-minded view when I heard that it was, there was really nobody that was, and I'm thinking people that want to convert from oil to gas, and there's no one in the city right now. So we put this moratorium on. We're telling them that, you know, you have to stick it out with oil for another winter because it's just not safe to put to have the people in there that are doing the work. I did not, you know, at the time. Now we have a lot more discussion. We have a lot of people reaching out to us who, I don't think the intent when we took the vote was to create a financial burden on residents. I'm okay at this point saying, going forward, anybody that wants to start a project in Arlington, understand that you can't get your permit right now. You have to, you know, I know plenty of the contractors do work in the winter. They put propane in. It's not unheard of. I think a lot of other cities have propane. But, you know, I do think we need to revisit a little bit of the language just as it regards to people that have, and it's not necessarily someone that had an open permit, but the reason I had talked about the dates of the purchase, when this gentleman purchased his property at the beginning of July, he could do it with the gas line. And propane doesn't help him because he can't knock down the house without the cut and cap. So I think while I support the motion, I reaffirm the motion, I think there is a public safety issue at this time. And again, we said this before, if this lockout goes on for an extended period, we might have to revisit it. But I think we need to allow for some discretion for residents and people operating in Arlington that have a financial burden. Specific, so it would have to, and I don't know what that is. I'm open to hearing suggestions for the board, but allowing some sort of mechanism that we can evaluate, because if someone is holding on to a property, you know, a mortgage for a commercial property is significant, and paying taxes, and that is going to add up, and it's going to add up quick. And at the end of the day, if we didn't allow the permit and he couldn't do anything with his property, he's probably just going to have to resell the property as is and take a loss. So I think in situations where there's an actual financial burden on a citizen or somebody operating in Arlington, we should have some sort of mechanism to evaluate that. And I understand this still, to allow the work still creates an issue with a public safety issue for the people that are really the people that own the property that's the work's being done on. But I think for some people, they have to weigh that, you know, a new business that is riding on being able to complete their project. In a fairness argument, I think there is some sort of tailored language that we can come up with that absorbs the risk. It says to anyone else, that says, if you want to come and knock down a house in Arlington, you have to know that this is in place, and for the time being, you're not going to be issued a permit. But for anyone that can show us that they started a project before the moratorium was in place, I would like to see some sort of mechanism that alleviates the financial burden.
Kevin?
So I am going to move to water down this, Diane. So would you rather go first before I really infuriate you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of losing sight here that it's public safety. And in the midst of all this and the hundreds of complaints that have come from residents, businesses, and union officials that have been on site, Secretary of State Bill Galvin was down in front of DPU this morning with hundreds of workers. Governor candidate Jay Gonzalez was down there. DPU had posted a meeting and I'm saying this for the level of trust, because I'm sincere about public safety. It's great to say they have a financial burden, but if you're sending out someone who's unqualified and something bad happens, which has been happening, then it kind of flies in the face. We either did this to get political or whatever, or we did it for pure public safety. So when they were down there at DPU, none of the United Steelworkers were allowed in. They stopped Jay Gonzalez, as well as the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, who basically brushed past the people. They said, you can't go up. He said, this is a publicly posted meeting. I can go up there. And then they said, well, the meeting, they met and they're gone now, the commission, DPU. And he said, well, I'm Secretary of State and I am going up there and I want to see when they signed, who signed in when and who signed out. When he got up there, the commissioner, DPU commissioner, I'm going to say your last name wrong, it was either O'Connor or O'Connell, said, I really can't give you any information. He said, well, I want public information. What sites has DPU investigated in the midst of all this and all the many complaints that came in that you can document and give to me? She said one sitting town in Massachusetts, that DPU, where questions about safety, about qualified personnel, about safe equipment, actually was investigated that she could give Secretary Bill Galvin documentation. And that was from Arlington, and I had nothing to do with it. But one complaint they could provide to the Secretary of State today. I say we stick to the moratorium. National Grid is trying to play through its bullying letter of falsehoods and all that, as well as, saying, oh, yes, of course we'll do the work. Well, even if they did, the town should find some way that we make sure that when we're sending the service out, it's a safe service. So where is the solution to that? Attorney General Maura Healey filed on September 1st that she wants DPU to conduct a transparent investigation with state and federal safety officials. She cites the complaints, cited by residents, businesses, and union workers. Basically, National Grid said many of their replacement workers and managers are doing tasks that are not part of their ordinary duties. Basically, the people that have to do the desk job are doing their desk job. They're also the ones that are being sent out there. I've been out there and I've seen it. Longwood Ave, when you have to close Beth Israel for an hour and a half and move people away because of major gas leak, if that blew, it happened in Malden, it's happened in Lawrence, it's happened in Lowell, it's happened in Winchester. It seems like, other cities and towns, and it's more than 23. I don't know where that number came from. I know it came from Wicked Local in Winchester, but the night we voted it was a much larger number. I think what it is some cities and towns did a moratorium, and Winchester did, God bless you, what they call a double down. They did twice as much as what we did in the moratorium. But what I would like to do is work with the Attorney General's office, who is also asking about, what work National Grid has done, what services they have provided, what services they haven't, and any costs that are not incremental to the lockout, that it doesn't come out of ratepayers, it comes out of National Grid shareholders. And then the other thing is, which I think is very important, she's offered assistance to DPU in the form of temporary inspectors or additional funding to ensure the inspections during the lockout. My main issue is, and everyone else's is, safety. And I have been out there. I've been in East Arlington off of Lake Street. They're sending out equipment with no inspection stickers. When the police go up and try to get information off of them, I've seen them off the bulldozer, they take off the license plate. Some cities and towns, what they do is they're issuing tickets and towing cars. And that's something for the manager, I think, to address, because I had people, even Facebooking me. My mother lives on the next street. What I want to do is exactly what I'm hearing from my colleagues is, what's the process? If we can do some hardship cases, the way I would feel comfortable is if the process actually were to occur, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, but that something is set up there that there is an inspector that's going out to these job sites. Right now, one complaint investigated, and the DPU has 2 meter reader certified. This is not live gas line certification. And what I'm getting from the Attorney General, and she's calling for this to commence, I believe, within, the next week, as well as the meeting today with Governor Baker, who, when he got the information, the unions and other officials who went there, and again, I wasn't there, seemed to get an indication that he's going to come out with some kind of a statement. It may fly against National Grid in the lockout, or may fly against National Grid, the management, but I would prefer to keep the moratorium the way it is. I'm concerned about the emergency work that they're doing, that they don't have, qualified people for, but that we work with the Attorney General in her office and avail ourselves of the opportunity to say, okay, you know what, we have a couple of special circumstances, but realize National Grid's going to say this to some other people, and they're going to come in with the same story, and I don't mean to put it down. At some point, you have to see through, front of the pack may be more genuine than, once they see, Arlington's a big town. So I wouldn't be comfortable lightening up this moratorium, because it's still the same public safety, until we could ensure that not only on, I think the town manager, if we could do something similar to what Winchester did Monday night at their select board meeting, they said even for emergency work, the select board through the town manager, there'll be an extra level of surveillance, and not that you have to talk to the Winchester town manager, so that when National Grid's coming out and saying, yeah, we have qualified people, we have the inspector here, and all the equipment's up to code and has been inspected, that's not happening. So the Winchester Select Board said to the town manager, use whatever departments you have to, and I think the DPW director said it wouldn't be his, to make sure, and it's basically filing paperwork, give the credentials, give the vehicle with the VIN number and the license plate, and so I would like to not water down the moratorium, because then, did we vote it for public safety or not? Because it's still, and I think there's more than enough in terms of, from the Attorney General and from, some of our colleagues over there, as well as Governor Baker's meeting today, as well as what happened down at DPU. There really is nobody out there overseeing. National Grid, in my opinion, is lying, saying, oh, everyone out there is certified, we have inspectors on the site. How come there's only one in the town of Arlington? And I know where the area was. They called me and I said, I don't want to get involved, because people will say it's a different thing. So I don't want to water down the moratorium. So I'd like to keep it the way it is and work with the Attorney General in the next week or two through the chair to say, you know what, Arlington wants to be the first, that you're going to give extra inspectors, because we have, if this is what we're feeling, 2 hardship cases, along with emergency work, that we want inspectors out there.
Kevin?
Well, what I'm about to do would not preclude still continuing to work towards that. I do want to make exceptions to the moratorium, and in no way to endanger public safety. So there's no question. At the time, I feel that I believed that we were closer to a settlement than indeed we are, and there's talk of now going out 6 months. While I certainly want to help and support the union, we also have to work with the management of National Grid. But our first responsibility is to the citizens of Arlington. I move that we approve both of the permits that came here before us tonight, and further that this board empower the town manager on a case-by-case basis to be able to, especially cases that have started before this strike. I think it's totally unfair to people that they're stuck in this situation, and I don't believe by making a few exceptions that we are particularly ruining the union's chances for any sort of a settlement. So that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hurd.
Just to add to that.
Okay, sorry, Joe.
So, and I'm happy to, admittedly, I might not have, I open it up to the board to try to craft what this means. And Diane, I think what you're saying makes sense. And I think to have a process to involve the town manager like they did in Winchester in emergency and exigent circumstances. And I think we need to make it very clear that exigent circumstances aren't somebody that buys a property next month and says that they really want to do it, or somebody that just really wants to get gas in before the winter. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's only a couple months for which anyone can for which you can even install gas lines, correct?
We usually have a moratorium on any pavement cutting at November 15th.
November 15th. So essentially, it would be cases that come before us very quickly. But I'm happy to support adding on to the motion some sort of process that you feel would, help ensure public safety, whether it's having the manager review the contract, the people doing the work, whether it's, like you said, having an inspector on site at cost to homeowner. I don't know, maybe the person that's claiming exigent circumstances, if that's, I don't know the ins and outs,
But
if
then I
that's
think
even.
that would, except for the developer that has 4 units, God forbid anything happens, nobody gets hurt in his units. The way it's been outlined I'll let the Attorney General speak to it, they would have to pay for someone from the fire department to be there ready, and if it wasn't one of the 2 DPU meter reader, which aren't certified for gas, or if it was Attorney Healy's inspectors that she's going to offer, those costs would have to be borne, and I think for an individual, that might be a little bit exorbitant, maybe not for a developer of a 4-unit, but, it's up to what my colleagues want, but I don't think.
I don't know what the number is. If it's $10,000, then it's probably too much to put on an individual. If it's $1,000 and you have exigent circumstances that you're losing $5,000 a month in cost, then that is going to look like a much sweeter deal. And I don't think, I don't think we're going to be overrun by these requests, because based on the criteria that we're putting out there, exigent circumstances means somebody that had a project, at least the way I define it, has a project in motion at the time, July 20 odd that we voted on this. Someone that already had a project in motion at the time, based on the discretion of the town manager. So I don't think we're all of a sudden going to get 15 requests. But, like I said, I'm happy to hear what it would look like to put some extra safety precautions. In the same token, we're putting the extra doubling down precautions on the emergency work that we're allowing already, and this exception we're creating for these few exigent circumstances cases.
Adam has also indicated he wants to talk.
Okay.
So I simply wanted to say thank you. Didn't mean to cut off Mr. Curo. Whatever the board's prerogative is, I'm happy to implement, but just hearing as this dialogue is developing, I would think that sitting down with inspectional services, fire department, engineering, we could come up with some type of safety scheme for limited circumstances, for whatever criteria the board would talk about. I would be concerned on a longer-term basis that we would be able to sustain that without having impacts on other services. So for however that impacts you and your thinking, I did want to say that. I don't, sitting here tonight, I don't know enough about how much of town time this would take to be able to commit to it long-term.
I think Mr. Heim wanted to kick in.
Yep. If I may, members of the board, to me, the board has, from listening to dialogue, you have 3 options. You can say that this is the policy that we've passed, and that's it. You can say that this is the policy that we've passed, and we don't think that this policy was meant to encapsulate these 2 situations where we've got this, basically things that were essentially ready to go right away, and therefore you're not making any changes to the policy, you're just addressing individual situations that you think weren't meant to be captured by the policy. Or you can amend the policy in some kind of way that either offers direction to say what circumstances might serve as exceptions that are not currently codified in the policy. And I hope that summary is somewhat helpful. Maybe it's a little obvious, but again, I would say that you can say that this is the policy and these 2 projects fall under the policy and that's it. You can say that these projects were not meant to be encompassed by this policy because of the timing and things of that nature, and that folks should understand that, you know, it's not about going forward, it's about when this policy was passed. Or you could give some very specific amendment that provides for what those exigent circumstances are. I hope that I've encapsulated what I think Mahan very aptly described as a series of considerations, and Mr. Hurd is also sort of contemplating generally in terms of how you would navigate this type of issue.
Joe? Thank you. That was actually very helpful, both of you. So I'm sympathetic to the issue of, as we call them, exigent circumstances. I'm also sympathetic to the issue that there are a number of working people, presumably employees of some of these folks who have gotten caught in the middle of an unfortunate situation. I don't know that it's fair for us as the policymaking board to put that on the manager to exercise his discretion without coming back to us with the language around that. If we're going to make amendments to the resolution, I'd love to see the new clauses. One, defining what those exigent circumstances are, what the board feels are reasonable criteria for exceptions. And two, I think codifying the types of safety measures after the manager's done some research that would be reasonable. And I'd be open to considering that if we came back at our next board meeting, actually putting out an amended language to our current resolution with the language right in front of us with those two new clauses, defining the exigent circumstances where we would provide an exception and defining the safety measures that we think would be reasonable that we could actually provide as a town to stay true to the original purpose of the resolution. That's kind of where I'm at right now, Kevin. I think I would like to postpone to allow the manager to come back to us with some, and town council with some recommended language that we could take. I don't want to put that policy piece on the manager. I think we have to take it. Yeah.
And can I say to that, just in the spirit of compromise, if I could compromise, but also kind of get my druthers of what I'd like to do. What I'd like to do is, if we do that clarification of the policy of what the board is through, and also hear from the town manager, what I would like to do is to say that we further define what our policy is, which is, you know, grade 1 emergency work only, that the manager come up with, just for emergency work, come up with a policy of what the town can do to ensure that proper personnel, equipment, and inspectors are out there. Put that in place, and then maybe have, similar to what Mr. Curo, Mr. Hurd, and Mr. Greeley, I think everybody is saying, as broad as general, some sort of phraseology that says this applies only to gas 1 break emergency work, as well as any other, on a case-by-case basis, determinations by the Board of Selectmen. You know what I mean? Because, like, if we can get, I'm not trying to stop either of these two individuals, but I, honest to goodness, want to make sure you get safe service and your neighbors get safe service, you know? So my thing was, like, I'd like our policy to be, even if National Grid comes in from now to however long this goes, there is this process set up, and maybe also working with the Attorney General's office, finding out if we can charge National Grid every time they come in, because, you know, we're incurring costs. But that we also, on a case-by-case basis, can, you know, approve, you know, gas 2 and gas 3. I think you guys would be, you know, what they call mainline 3 versus mainline 1 complaint. Is that what you were saying, Mr. Carroll, something like that? I'm afraid if we get too specific with the language, I'd like it to be mostly this was what applies to emergency work or any other work considered by the board on a case-by-case basis. The more specific, or maybe, let's see all the details and then make sure we close the loopholes, because I can see people coming in and saying, well, you said this and I read it this way.
I get, well, can I provide the clarification? I get worried about case-by-case basis, and I think that if we can put in policy what we consider. I mean, I think we do have one clear example here. Somebody has an open permit before the time we adopted this. I suspect we could agree that that's an exigent circumstance, and it doesn't seem that there is an element of fairness there. How we balance that against safety, I don't know, and I'd look to the manager for a program there. What else might constitute an exigent circumstance?
So
I don't know.
I haven't gone yet, so I think I want to take a swing. Adam, when you talked about managing safety through inspectional services and fire and police, and you said that something you could do in the short term, but you were concerned about doing long term. Does short term mean, say, through November 15th, or you meant short term like 3 weeks?
When I was thinking about short term, I was thinking more in terms of let's say there's a dozen projects that are similar to the Mr. Callahan and Mr. Borstel. I don't know the exact number, but let's say it's a dozen. Were there to be a criteria that would clear that backlog? That's what I was thinking about for short term. Like, might that take 6 weeks? I'm not sure, but sort of if this lockout goes on for a year, I don't think we could just say we're going to offer a new service of safety inspections on the go-forward basis. And frankly, that would probably serve to counter purposes to the union's attempts, right? If all of a sudden the town was substituting the union's work of ensuring safety.
Okay, thank you. So here, I'm actually still ready to go tonight on a change, and I can support a lot of what's in Kevin's motion. I'd like to consider, like us to suggest that we manage the safety question by saying that all such work to be supervised under the town manager with the understanding and direction of us to the town manager that he should be creating particular safety protocols. I think that we should envision this policy being in place through November 15th, and then in the winter, they're either going to figure this out or they're not, and then we're going to have to deal with this problem again when it freezes. And I'm going to say that it only applies to projects that were started before the moratorium was placed and have significant financial hardship, and we're going to leave that one as a judgment case for the manager, which doesn't exactly get what you wanted, Joe, but it may get you there. So those would be that's where I'm prepared to be. I don't know if I can count to 3 on that, but that's where I'd be. Mr. Greeley.
So, I'll accept that as my motion, provided we approve these 2 permits tonight, because I think we all do agree. What did you call it, Joe? One instance or whatever is the permits were started before the moratorium. But we have, 3 multi-use projects? The one right near Stop and Shop, where I don't know whether they're gas or whatever's going on there. So, but in terms of these 2, let me just make this motion and then go to the next, if I may.
Yeah, so just so you're clear, I wasn't trying to replace your motion. I was suggesting that they'd be addition.
Right,
okay.
Right. And I agree, especially where you went from here. But I want to separate it so that I move that these 2 permits we approve tonight with your, the manager making sure our gas inspector, inspectional services, whatever, are involved and we ensure the safety to what degree we can. And then I would agree that we will in the next 2 weeks, but I think it's going to be hard-pressed to figure out what exactly the exigent circumstances, is that what you called it, Joe?
I took it from the attorney here.
And I said significant financial distress was what I actually used.
Okay, but as long as we'll approve these 2 permits, I'm okay with waiting for the rest of it.
I mean, to me, the more black and white way to handle this is people that have started, within the manager's discretion, I think he can determine if someone has started a project for a builder. It's someone who bought a property before we put the moratorium in place. For, a homeowner, it's someone that's shown that they've been in the whether they've been getting approvals from a commission, whether they pulled the permit, they can prove that they have invested their own money into the process, which is now stalled because of it. So it wasn't the intention to leave it as just an out there exigent circumstances exception where somebody bought a house yesterday and says, oh, now I'm in exigent circumstances. We can now say,
so my motion did explicitly include before the moratorium.
Okay. Yeah, so when the question is what's exigent circumstances, to me, that's someone who started a project before the moratorium. And just about any, I mean,
Yeah, so to be clear, my proposal doesn't have the word exigent, because I'm,
Yeah.
like, and I'm trying, it said. there
well, I
were
was
two
just
yeah, okay, sorry.
responding to Kevin.
Yeah.
So as long as we can do that and incorporate some of Diane's suggestions about keeping, safety, putting safety front, having a process where public safety is front and center, and making sure that they don't start the work before the manager and the fire department and police department and DPW are comfortable with the work starting. Whatever that process is. I don't know what that process is. I trust that the town manager can handle that.
Joe?
I might suggest one more measure, drawing on what Ms. Mahan put forward, that the board contact the DPU with a copy to the Attorney General's office, urging the DPU to take up the offer that's been extended by the Attorney General for assistance in the hiring of temporary inspectors or additional financial assistance. I think that the board should take that measure as well and let the state know we're concerned about the situation.
I'm okay with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I just say, the reason why I would favor until the next meeting is because I want to make sure what I'm voting on tonight is actually what's delivered. Like, right now, it's my opinion that if I were Mr. Chapdelaine, I would say to police and fire, any national grid work done here in Arlington, and heavy load equipment pulls up, bulldozer, whatever, and it's got no inspection sticker or expired, and they've taken their license plate off, that they be ticketed and towed immediately, as well as if any resident or whoever is out there, the homeowner, which they have come out and said, how do we know these people are doing what they're doing? That, the process be set up, whether the manager says, well, inspectional services, or the fire department, someone, administration from there will respond to that. My thing is, my vision of what I think should be done may not be A, what the town manager agrees with, or B, agrees, but it's not something we can deliver. So I would just ask my colleagues to afford me a courtesy to let the manager come up with the policy and what he hears from the police chief, inspectional services, and the fire chief. If those were the department heads he said he was going to speak to, he might have just said inspectional services, and then put forth towards me exactly what it is, so I can say I'm still maintaining the public safety, which is the core. It has nothing to do, I never mentioned union negotiations or anything like that. I'm not, this purely is a safety issue with me, coming from the craft that I came from originally. Oh, no, you intimated that I was, and I never have uttered those words. And it's kind of like a straw man. I'm just saying I don't want to be the straw man on that. So I would just like the courtesy to be able to see at the next meeting. And then if the intent of what I want to have happened isn't addressed or isn't promised, then I'm going to vote no. But I would look so silly if I vote for this carte blanche tonight and said, oh yeah, I voted for something, and we're going to make sure everything's going to be out there, and then the manager comes back and says, I can only do A, B. I can't do A, B, and C. And then I'm going to vote against it. Because I want to remain true for where I started out on this. It truly is public safety. And I don't think 2 weeks, giving me the 2 weeks is really going to be detrimental in terms of, especially in light of, the Attorney General and hopefully the governor, which, like I said, he could come out either way and pretty much might decide this issue. But I think a lot's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. And that also gives Adam, I want Arlington to be first in the queue, with the Attorney General's offer that we get that. So I'd like to wait the 2 weeks. If not, I'm going to vote against it because I don't know what I'm voting on.
Point of clarification, when you say the November 15th deadline, is that to issue a permit or for the work to be done?
So generally speaking, not to overcomplicate this, generally speaking, we say you can't cut the pavement after November 15th. So if you, basically, you could get the permit on November 14th and do the job, but if you don't get it done by the next day, you can't do it. We have in more recent years, based on the backlog of gas leak repairs, allowed the gas company, I think actually just starting last year, to work throughout the whole winter. That's obviously a different situation right now. I just wanted to make that clear in case, that came up. But generally speaking, yeah, November 15th is, work must be done before November 15th.
Joe?
I do agree with Ms. Mahan in the sense that I feel more comfortable having the language in front of us. I think from our conversation, sense of the board is when we come back, and it's actually not even 2 weeks, remember, we're Wednesday today, so it's 12 days, that whatever amendments we make to our resolution would in all likelihood resolve the issues for the two gentlemen who have spoken before us tonight and would in effect address this situation. I realize it's another 12 days, but I feel that we're better served by having the language in front of us and doing it on a policy basis rather than on a case-by-case basis from the board. But I agree with what's been put out and by you, Mr. Chair.
I have a suggestion. I don't know if this will be seconded by the board, but if one of the motions is to approve the request, and one of our concerns is that National Grid is just using them as pawns to try to get us to lift the moratorium. I agree with Mr. Mahan and Ms. Mahan and Mr. Carroll that it's good. I still am not 100% clear what the language that we're voting on, so I'm happy to have language that reflects what we're talking about. But what if we were to approve these two permits under the...
Yeah.
We don't have the policy.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable approving the permits without the safety associated with it. So to me, it's a package.
Okay.
So do we have a motion? We need a
Currently,
motion?
at the moment, the only motion on the floor is Mr. Greeley's. I wasn't rushing to a vote, so if there's a motion to table, we can.
And I'll also put a motion on, a motion to postpone to our next meeting.
Motion by Mrs. Mahan to postpone.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kira. I'm okay with waiting 12 days. Actually, I've been persuaded myself.
Kevin's on, his.
Yeah.
No, I'm not for these two gentlemen.
I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. So I think the good news is I feel like we have a consensus that we think we can get to
Right.
a week from
I agree.
Monday.
I agree.
I think that we're going to be deliberate about it, though, and I think I can count to 3 on that one. Is there further discussion that people want to do now before we move to that? Before we move on to the next issue?
No, I would just say to the two gentlemen before us that based on what we're saying, it is pretty clear to me that you will fall within that exception. Understanding that 12 days it could be thousands of dollars of carrying costs. We just need to get the language right, and then we can get, the end is near. We need to make sure we hit it right the first time.
We all agree on that, so I don't know why we won't vote for these two tonight. But we don't want to do that. And reword, I understand we can reword for other cases, but clearly, in my opinion, where permits and all of this was started before the moratorium, I can't believe that won't be a condition we all agree to. I think we all agree to it right now, but go, my friends.
Twice in one night that we're wrong.
My goodness.
On a motion by Mrs. Mahan to postpone, seconded by Mr. Cura, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
4-1, postponed to come back September 24th with but I believe we're going to have a consensus on the language. Or at least we're going to be able to count to 4, even if we can't.
I'll be with you then.
Yeah. You weren't the one I had in mind at that moment, Mr. Greeley.
Fair.
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Yes, we're going to just do a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 9:47. All right, calling the meeting back to order. Thank you for your patience during that break. We are now up to Number 16, approval, receipt of gift, James Athens, to establish a fund for the benefit of Arlington seniors. Mr. Heim.
So, my pleasure to tell the Select Board that Mr. James Athens, who my understanding is over 90 years old, and has made a donation of $162,000.89 for the benefit of Arlington senior programs in memory of his wife, Helen. So he is offering this gift to the town of Arlington for the benefit of Arlington senior programs. It is to be a income trust, so that the $100,000 would essentially form a principal, and then the income would be used for programs every year. And again, in honor of his wife, Helen, I know that Christine Bongiorno and a number of other folks from Health and Human Services, as well as folks from the Council on Aging, worked with Mr. Athens to develop and make sure that we were comfortable with the type of gift that he'd like to make. By law, the Select Board has to vote to accept this gift, but I just want to again take a moment to recognize this gentleman's generosity and his contributions, again, in memory of his wife, Helen. I know that the Health and Human Services and Council on Aging is very pleased and happy that they can honor his wife and help Arlington seniors at the same time. So with that, I'd ask for the board's vote to accept this gift and to essentially establish a income trust in Helen Athens' name.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Mahan.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kiro. Kevin.
How's it administered?
So we have a number of income trusts, and basically what happens is that we have to, Karen Riley from the Treasurer's Office, in combination with program staff, help to make sure that only expenditures authorized under the trust are essentially expended. So we make sure that it only goes towards the right, what was intended by the donor.
But, so any senior citizen in Arlington could apply for?
So there's a couple of different types of programs that this gift can help to support. Existing programs such as certain types of assistance, but as well as a broader range of programs. It's not so restrictive as to say that it can only be these, couple of things. It's more that it has to be for the benefit of Arlington seniors through Council on Aging programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Diane.
And in response to Helen's husband, James, can we, I know you say you can go to organizations or committees or commissions that benefit seniors, where he explicitly states he wants this to be direct care services for seniors, not office equipment, Xerox machines, things like that. If it goes to, say it goes to the Council on Seniors, we don't have a group called that, right? Say it goes to the Council on Seniors, that they get that money, but when they're budgeting, they can't touch any of that money for any kind of office equipment. Like, will they have a separate line item for that, as well as when they get audited, we can ensure that, yes, it went to the Council on Seniors, which did purchase this or something else, but your total dollars infused that year of X amount, here it is in that line item, it went to direct care, medical, where he explicitly says that, and I know exactly what he's talking about that, and everybody else does. So that will be somehow set up as a separate line item.
That's correct, Ms. Mahan. We make sure that for any one of our dedicated trusts, that only expenditures authorized by the trust are essentially approved, and where there's a specific restriction, you can't buy furniture. That's actually a pretty easy one, because that stuff tends to be under a very different line item, where we're very confident that we can always honor the intent of these gifts, and grateful for Mr. Athens' generosity.
And I'd like to, on behalf of myself and the board, extend our condolences to Mr. Athens James on the passing of his wife Barbara, as well as say I'm really impressed by his strength that in this, obviously you can see how much he cared about his wife, Helen, but not only that, how much they, as residents, care about the town of Arlington. and really in this time of grief, finding such a positive way to have something come out of the process he's in right now. And obviously, both he and his wife Helen must love this community, loved this community very much, to do such a generous gift and commemoration. So again, to the Athens family, condolences on the passing of Mrs. Athens, Helen, and sincere gratitude for this generous gesture in your time of grief.
Anybody else?
Oh, I would just say, I don't think we need it in the motion, but if the chair would be willing to work with the office on an appropriate letter of thanks to to Mr. Athens on behalf of the board, I think that would be more than appropriate.
Great.
If you'd be willing.
Definitely.
I was going to recommend we invite him here to thank him and give him a letter at that time.
Okay.
Is he healthy? And I don't.
My understanding, Mr. Greeley, is that he's living in Harwich now, but we can certainly reach out and invite him, and I'm sure that would, be, if he can
And this
attend,
is,
he can attend.
it's extraordinary for a private citizen to do such a thing.
Or if he wants to send a family rep that lives near here,
Of course.
maybe?
Yeah, sure.
I'll help coordinate that with Health and Human Services.
Great. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next up, special town meeting, Mr. Chapdelaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as the board knows, the town meeting voted to extend the adult use, adult use marijuana moratorium into the end of this calendar year until December 31st. So we do have a need to have a special town meeting to contemplate adopting zoning for adult use marijuana. So we're asking that the board schedule that special town meeting or call that special town meeting for December 5th, and then in the following agenda item, open the warrant for one day on October 4th. There may be some other matters that occur between now and October 4th that we would like to place in the warrant, but the only matter that I would say the board is being asked to call the special town meeting for is for that marijuana zoning matter.
Ms. Mahan.
I'd like to vote that the board open the warrant for a special town meeting to be held on Wednesday, December 5th, 2018, at 8 p.m. at the Arlington Town Hall. The warrant will open Thursday, October 4th, 2018, at 8 a.m. and will remain open until Thursday, October 4th, 2018, till 4 p.m.
So you're wrapping up 7 items, agenda 17 and 18 in a single vote, I think, which is fine.
Is that okay? Okay, sorry.
But it's a Thursday, the 4th?
The day the warrant opens and closes.
Right, is that a Thursday?
Correct.
So we should go to 7. Opening for the full day, right?
You can either do it 4 or 7, whatever you want.
Whichever, either way.
Can I amend it till 7 p.m.
Sure.
on that Thursday?
Got a motion for Mrs. Mahan,
Second.
second by Mr. Greeley.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, just because it's a Thursday,
Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. So item 19, town manager contract. I'm going to delay that until after we do our executive session. So we'll do our executive session. So I'm going to pick up correspondence, then we'll do an executive session. And then I find it likely that we will come out with a public vote after that executive session, though it depends upon what happens in the executive session, to be sure. So moving on to correspondence received. We have a letter from Mr. Radosha.
Move receipt?
Motion, Mr. Mahan. Second. Second by Mr. Kiro. And Mr. Radosha is here. Did you wish to speak to your correspondence?
Yes, Bob Rodosha again. Yeah, I think we need to really look into the some kind of a docking system or some kind of control. It seems too many places I'm running into, and I see it. I saw it on Mystic Street today, Sunday night when I was coming home. There was a bike that's still there, partially on the sidewalk. There's a cluster by Robin Hood Lane, Robin Hood Road. About 4 bicycles on the corner there, impeding onto the sidewalk, and scattered throughout town. I see them in places. Most of the time they're okay. They're on the grass strip or anything else, but often they are impeding on the sidewalks, I think. And as I point out in my letter, that Somerville has a system where they have the docking stations, and they're all there, no problem, they're on the street, they're not on the sidewalks or anything else. And I know this was kind of a trial at the beginning, we're gonna see how it works out, but as you go forward with other negotiations and so forth, looking into it, I think you need to kind of find something to rein it in a little bit. So, thank you.
Those docking stations in Somerville cost $100,000 each.
Really?
Yeah.
Who pays for those?
They have access to corporate donors that they won't give us access to.
But I think we can still do something to, and there are plenty of places around, I think. I saw them up in front of the town hall, and there are probably businesses that would welcome having something in the corner of their lot, a parking space or something. But anyhow, I think it needs to be addressed or looked into, that's all. Because it is beginning to clutter up many places. And as the winter goes on, now we're going to see what it's really like. We start having snow piled up in here and there and so forth. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Town Day, Marie.
Happy Town Day indeed.
That's it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we will now go into, I haven't forgotten anything, right? Could I have a motion to go into executive session? Mrs. Mahan?
I'd like to move that we go into executive session to conduct a strategy session in preparation for contract negotiations with non-union personnel, the town manager, and/or conduct contract negotiations with same, and that when it is the board's intent that when we come out of executive session, it will be for the purposes of a vote and/or a motion to adjourn, and we come out in open session.
Second.
Motion is second. Could, Mrs. Kropelka?
Yes.
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 All right, we are in executive session. I will, if you guys want to wait in the hall. All right, coming out of executive session, we did indeed conduct negotiations, or discussions about negotiation with the town manager, and then we invited the town manager into the executive session to complete the negotiations. And we did indeed take a vote, and we in executive session, and we'll now repeat it in public. Mrs. Mahan.
I'd like to vote to approve the contract for the town manager for the 2019 to 2022 timeframe as voted in executive session.
Second.
Doug, we get this right? We're good? I'll just say that, I mean, as a whole, the board is really excited to get Adam for another 3 years. And so our town, the term is set by the Town Manager Act. And so really, like, the 3 years is set in stone. And then really it's about, what are the terms and, like, what's the compensation and what's the quality of life. And those are the conversations that we've been having. And we have a robust review process with the town manager where he gets, excellent reviews every year. And it's also iterative where there's change and progress that happens in that. And then every 3 years we come to a contract. And I know I'm speaking for us all when I say that we are really, really happy to have you for another 3 years.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate the vote of support.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait. Oh.
What?
Oh, should we just remind people of Town Day?
Oh, good idea.
I rescind my move to adjourn.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone that's watching that it is Town Day, and I hope to see you there, and I want you all to pray for a nice day. We've only had to cancel it once, and that was when your father was chair, 15 years ago, because of the hurricane.
Next meeting, September 24th. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.